Chapter 1730. The young man with a fan Feng Buell squinted when he heard that. He walked around the entrance of God King Duanmu's dwelling a few times and immediately became interested. He said, "The entrance is hidden in space. It's so great that even with my eyes, I struggle to tell its existence. However, I just happen to have studied formations a little, so I can try." At the same time, there was a bustling city in the neighboring divine kingdom of Qingyang. A man who only seemed to be in his 20s strolled through the busy streets slowly with a fan in his hand. The corners of the young man's lips were slightly perked. He seemed rather impudent as he observed the surroundings with great interest, as if he found it all to be extremely novel. Behind the young man was a burly man who seemed to be in his 20s. He followed the young man closely. The man was extremely ordinary. He did not give off any presences at all, making him seem like an ordinary person. The outside world really is colorful. I've only strolled around on this street and my horizons have already been broadened. It's not like back in the clan, where I see the same faces day and night. It has reached the point where it's bothersome. I've only passed through the trials after much desperation, so the oldies back at home finally allowed me out. This time, I'll have all the fun I can get. Unless they call me back, I'll never return. The young man played around with his fan. He was in extremely good spirits. "Young master, you've come out to train and toughen up, not to play," reminded the man behind him. "Uncle Qin, isn't training just playing? And isn't playing training? Isn't it all the same?" The young man said slightly unhappily. "Young master, of course, they're not the same," the middle-aged man said seriously. Before he could finish talking, the young man shrugged and said, all right. Uncle Qin, I understand. Let me stroll around first, and I'll go train later." At this moment, a luxurious carriage towed by 9 rare beasts ran down the street. The expressions of all the people on the two sides changed when they saw the carriage, and they opened up a path in a hurry. In particular, the women who had some beauty paled in fright. It was as if they had seen the most terrifying matter in the world, and they all fled in a hurry. At this moment, a golden rope emerged from the carriage. It unfurled into around a dozen thinner ropes and wrapped around a woman each. As they screamed, they were quickly pulled into the carriage. All of the women caught were the most beautiful among the females present. The young master of the Mo family has come out looking for playthings again. Sigh, these women sure are unfortunate to end up in the hands of that young master. Who knows how many women the young master of the Mo family has dirted? All the women he has captured have never appeared again. Who knows what has happened to them? What can we do? The Mo family reigns supreme in the Blue River province. No one dares to offend the Mo family in the Blue River province. After all, the Mo family is the reason why the Blue River province is one of the 5 most powerful provinces in the divine kingdom of Qingyang. Quite a few passers-by discussed this matter on the sides of the street. Many of them pitted the women. No one stood forward against the young master of the Mo family for kidnapping people publicly. If they did that, they would only end up dead. "My elder sister, let go of my sister." A child who seemed less than 10 years old ran out and charged towards the carriage. He was panic-stricken. "You're looking to die," a cold voice rang out from the carriage. Without even making an appearance, a long whip emerged from the carriage, directly extending towards the child. The child had only just begun cultivating. He was not even an Earth Saint Master, so he would be dead for sure if the whip struck him. The eyes of the young man with a fan narrowed at the sight of this. With a clap, his fan was closed, and he directly extended his fan towards the whip from afar. Immediately, a powerful strand of origin energy shot out and knocked the whip aside. "How dare you? Who is getting in this young master's way? Are you sick of living?" An arrogant voice rang out from the carriage. The young man walked over under everyone's attention slowly. He tapped the fan in his hand as he smiled impolitely. "You dare to call yourself a young master before this young master? You sure are bold. The one who's tired of living is you. You dare to talk back to this young master? Kill him," the young master of the Mo clan said from within the carriage. The guards around the carriage immediately surged up as they charged towards the young man aggressively. The corner of the young man's lips perked up disdainfully. He said, "How dare you disrespect this young master? You should die for harming innocent women in the eye of the public. You should die for attacking a young child. You should die." The young man spread his fingers and opened the fan in his hand, directly fanning it towards the carriage. Flames immediately rose up with the wave of the fan, surging towards the sky. Flames emerged from the fan, turning into a violent dragon of fire that enveloped the guards and carriage of the Mo family. The violent flames came and left quickly. It had vanished in just the blink of an eye. At that moment, all the guards and the carriage enveloped by the flames vanished. Only some ash was left behind on the ground. The street fell silent at that moment. Everyone became stunned. What kind of fire was this? It reduced the young master of the Mo family along with his carriage into ash in a single moment while leaving the surrounding structures and people unscathed. Everyone's gaze towards the young man changed. This was definitely groundbreaking to kill the young master of the Mo family in the territory of the Mo family. After all, the Mo family was one of the 5 most powerful clans within the divine kingdom of Qingyang. They possessed an overgod and controlled an entire province. "Thank you, Savior, thank you." The women he had saved all thanked the young man before fleeing with lingering fear. They disappeared into the crowd. Looks like the Mo family is not up to anything good either. "Uncle Qin, let's go. Let's go wipe out the Mo family." The young man put his fan away and walked off indifferently. "Young master, you've already wiped out 4 clans along the way. The strong prey on the weak. That is the law of the saints' world. If you have to stick your nose into every matter, you'll have to wipe out quite a few clans on the entire cloud plain," the man beside him said helplessly. "If that's the case, let's leave this Mo family be for now. Uncle Qin, I heard that a god king's dwelling has appeared in the divine kingdom of Pingtian. It seems to belong to someone called Duanmu or something. Let's go check it out." The young man became excited once again. "Duanmu," the middle-aged man murmured to himself. A gleam of light flashed through his eyes and he nodded. "Let's go and check it out." Chapter 1731. Overgods attacking the formations. Soon after the young man with a fan and the burly man referred to as Uncle Qin left, a powerful presence rapidly appeared. In the sky, over a dozen men in black clothes had appeared. They were emotionless and cold. The weakest of them were at reciprocity, while the leader had already reached deity from the presence and pressure he gave off. "Who killed the young master of our Mo family?" "Chase him down," the deity said coldly. After learning about the direction which the young man had left in, he pursued with lightning speed. At the same time, a powerful presence surged into the sky from the estate of the Mo family. It surged out like an arrow, and the pressure it possessed actually came from a god. With the appearance of the god, a tremendous voice boomed through the sky. "Who has come to our Mo family and looks down on us?" There was rage within the voice, and the person shot off towards the young man like a sword. "Heavens, a god of the Mo family has appeared. It's enough to draw out a god of the Mo family. The senior who killed the young master of the Mo family earlier was probably a god. Gods are great existences. It's extremely difficult to see one normally. I never thought I was actually standing beside a god." Heated discussions appeared in the bustling street. Many people felt sorry for the young man with a fan. The Mo family basically controlled the entire provincial city. Even if the young man were a god, he would not be able to escape from the Mo family. What very few people noticed was that the god from the Mo family actually did not return. Moreover, the god never appeared in the Mo family ever again. More and more godhood experts gathered at the entrance of God King Duanmu's dwelling. Not only were over 80% of all the gods from the divine kingdom of Pingtian present, but the number of overgods constantly increased. Aside from the 5 ancestors of the 5 provincial cities, even the overgods from the royal city had come. By now, there were more than 10 overgods gathered. All the overgods had gathered at the entrance. They tried any idea they could think of to open up the dwelling, but no matter what they tried, nothing worked. Even the overgod Feng Buell, who had studied formations a little in the past, was pushed to his wits' end. "Looks like the ancestor of the Mo family from the divine kingdom of Qingyang has come. Even people of the divine kingdom of Qingyang have come," He seems like the ancestor of the divine sect of Sun Transformation from the divine kingdom of Qingyang. The ancestor of the Windless school from the divine kingdom of Qingyang has come as well. Overgods from the divine kingdom of 9 stars have come as well. Look, he's from the divine kingdom of Kaiyuan. As time went on, the number of overgods present only increased. Every single one of them was senior members of a divine kingdom, great figures who dominated entire regions. Their whereabouts would normally always be unknown, but they had all gathered in the divine kingdom of Pingtian today after receiving news of God King Duanmu's dwelling. The divine kingdom of Pingtian, the divine kingdom of Qingyang, the divine kingdom of 9 stars, and the divine kingdom of Kaiyuan all possessed roughly the same strength. Basically, every single divine kingdom possessed over a dozen overgods. Even though not all of them had gathered here, there were already over 30 overgods. There were even more gods. This is within our divine kingdom of Pingtian. God King Duanmu's dwelling belongs to our divine kingdom of Pingtian, so please leave if you are not part of the divine kingdom. The overgods of the divine kingdom of Pingtian were obviously displeased with the arrival of so many foreign overgods. One of them immediately spoke out righteously. Hee, that's true. It is in your divine kingdom of Pingtian, but who said that people from other divine kingdoms can't come here? Moreover, God King Duanmu's dwelling doesn't belong to your divine kingdom. According to my knowledge, your divine kingdom hadn't even been founded when God King Duanmu was at the peak of his fame. A black-robed old man sneered. He possessed an icy cold presence. He was the overgod from the Mo family of the divine kingdom of Qingyang. That's right. God King Duanmu's dwelling doesn't belong to your divine kingdom of Pingtian. The God King himself did not belong to the kingdom, so you're all dreaming if your divine kingdom of Pingtian plans to take it for themselves, added another overgod. He came from the divine kingdom of 9 stars. People of the divine kingdom of Pingtian, consider it. If you want to take God King Duanmu's dwelling for yourselves, we'll all become your enemies. Can you really afford to pick a fight like this? A beauty in a white dress said. She came from the divine kingdom of Kaiyuan. The overgod from the divine kingdom of Pingtian was met with the forceful rebuke from overgods of the 3 other divine kingdoms as soon as he spoke out, immediately causing his face to become rather ugly. He did not wish for the overgods of other divine kingdoms to enter the dwelling because the competition would become more intense with more people. Their chances of obtaining anything good would naturally decrease. However, they just happened to be unable to do anything. The divine kingdom of Pingtian was unable to hold back 3 other divine kingdoms that possessed similar power. Cut the bullshit. It doesn't matter how many overgods gather here if we can't even get through the main entrance. Let's think about a way in instead, said Feng Buell. Looks like the entrance to the dwelling is hidden in space. Everyone, why don't we work together and force out the formation hidden in space first, said the ancestor of the Mo family. Everyone immediately agreed to the suggestion. They all began to move, using their own techniques in an attempt to force out the entrance hidden in space. Immediately, violent booms rang out constantly. Terrifying ripples of energy permeated the surrounding space. It really did seem like the end of the world. The entire mountain range was flattened in a single instance. The shock waves of energy when the overgods struck out was not something that the gods could endure, especially when so many overgods struck out together. It forced back all the gods in the surroundings. God damn it. It's all because of the damned Mo clan and Ando clan. The gods of the Wainer clan watched on in the distance enviously. Their jealousy had reached the point where they wanted to roar out. God King Duanmu's dwelling was so well hidden and so hard to enter where even so many overgods were obstructed from entry. If they were inside in the dwelling, they would be able to enjoy the items left behind by the God King comfortably. Whenever they thought about that, the gods of the Wainer clan would be filled with jealousy and hatred to the point where they heaved heavily, and their eyes became bloodshot. Chapter 1732. The second strand of profound sword chi over 30 overgods struck out at the same time. The shock waves of energy formed terrifying storms. Only other overgods could keep their footing within the storms. Gods had already retreated to several hundred kilometers away. Even at such a distance, there were still many gods who had to use all their power to remain where they were. However, there were two exceptions in the space there. One was a handsome young man in white clothes. He held a fan and smiled impudently. He stared at the overgods who attacked the formations in interest. The young man was clearly only a god, yet he remained as stable as a mountain in the storms of energy caused by the overgods' attacks. The powerful ripples failed to even touch his hair. Upon closer inspection, it was quite obvious that the ripples of energy could not even get within 3 meters of the young man. Behind the young man stood a burly man. He seemed extremely ordinary, just like a mortal. However, he was able to hover in the air, and the ripples of energy were unable to get within 3 meters of the man as well. In that region of space, only where the young man and burly man stood was peaceful. The other places were like a surging ocean. Their existence naturally attracted the attention of all the overgods present. They directly looked past the young man and saw the burly man behind him. All their eyes narrowed. This was because they could not tell the cultivation level of the man. He seemed just like an ordinary person who had never cultivated before. However, they did not look down on him. Instead, they became fearful, paying particular attention towards the two of them. Although they knew that the man had used a secret technique to keep his strength hidden, he was able to stand there, which meant that his strength was extraordinary. However, what the young man did next made the complexions of all the overgods darken slightly. The young man actually pulled out a table several thousand meters in the air. The table was filled with various delicacies. The young man sat before the stable. He began eating as he watched them attack the entrance to God King Duanmu's dwelling. He was enjoying himself. On the other hand, the burly man stood beside the young man quietly like a guard. "Uncle Chin, how long do you think they'll take before they get through to the entrance of the dwelling?" The young man asked with some interest as he smiled indifferently. Duanmu has achieved some mastery over the laws of space. It really is difficult to find the entrance of his dwelling since he hid it in space. However, they already know its precise location now. It'll be difficult to say how long they'll take to open the dwelling. If it's just forcing out the entrance, it's much easier. All you have to do is destabilize the space there, and the entrance will naturally appear, replied the burly man referred to as Uncle Chin. "Uncle Chin, why don't we have a gamble? Let's gamble how much time it'll take for them to force out the entrance. I'm gonna bet that they can't do it even with 3 years' time," the young man said to the burly man as he enjoyed his delicacies leisurely. "I refuse," the middle-aged man turned him down flatly. "You're boring." The young man shook his head and he immediately became less interested. Although the overgods did not hear the conversation, they gained a rough understanding of it through lip-reading, and what they gathered made all of their faces sink slightly. "Who are those two?" "I don't know. I've never seen them before or even heard of them. But seeing how they can remain in the area affected by energy, they're probably overgods. The young man is only a mid-god, and he isn't using any power at all. The ripples of energy aren't stopped by him. Looks like it's the person behind him." A few of the overgods communicated with each other secretly. Without any doubt, the scornful actions of the young man had annoyed all the overgods present. They would not have minded it if he just wanted to watch. There were many others that were watching, and there were many more gods in the distance. However, he just had to take out a table of delicacies as well. That completely changed everything. He was not observing or learning. He was watching a show. Although they felt indignant, the overgods did not dare to cause trouble. They could already tell that the powerful man was only an attendant or a guard. They could not afford to provoke an organization who even had overgods as guards. Even if he was not an overgod but a late god, they still could not afford to provoke an organization that used late gods as guards. The young man spread his fingers, and his fan immediately opened up, perhaps due to the fact that he sensed that more and more overgods were directing their attention over to him. He said with a smile, "You don't need to look at me. I've just come out to enjoy myself, not to get in your way. Continue. Continue." The young man remained calm and composed before so many overgods. However, his behavior had confirmed what the overgods were doubting even more. "Ignore him. Let's keep going," an overgod said with a sunken face. All of them could tell that the young man had quite an impressive background. The overgods continued to try to force out the entrance of the dwelling, and booms constantly rang out. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had come and gone. 4 formation discs shone with dazzling light inside God King Duanmu's dwelling, guarding a particular region of space. They were extremely eye-catching in the dwelling. Within the regions enveloped was the space where Xinjian, Jianqin, Mo Ling, and Ando Fu cultivated. Unknowingly, they had already remained there for 5 years. At this moment, a powerful sword chi suddenly appeared within Jianqin's space. The formation disk that could withstand several attacks from gods collapsed and shattered in a split second. Even the formation disk itself was reduced to fragments, revealing Jianqin. A finger-sized sword chi hovered above Jianqin's head. It shone with pressing cold light, and just the sword intent it radiated with shattered the formation disk. As the sword intent continued to spread, even the formation's discs that guarded Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and Xinjian began to tremble violently. The formations collapsed at a visible rate, alarming Xinjian, Mo Ling, and Ando Fu. In the next moment, the sword intent vanished. The tiny sword chi above Jianqin's head had been stored into Jianqin's soul, erasing all the sharp light. Jianqin opened his eyes slowly and smiled. The second strand of profound sword chi had finally been condensed. Since he already had prior experience, he used even less time to condense the second strand. Chapter 1733. Venturing into the dwelling, what powerful sword intent! It even made me shiver in fear. Brother Jianqin, you've broken through again. Mo Ling arrived before Jianqin and said in shock. Jianqin's strength increased just too quickly. It had increased once again in this short amount of time. Ando Fu put his formation disc away and stood up. He also stared at Jianqin in shock. Xinjian also stopped cultivating. He opened his eyes and gazed at Jianqin. Jianqin shook his head in response to Mo Ling. I've only increased my understanding of a sword technique. My personal strength has not broken through. Soon afterwards, Jianqin looked toward Xinjian. He discovered that Xinjian had actually become a god. Jianqin was not surprised at all by how quickly Xinjian had become a god. After all, his comprehension of the laws of the world had already reached mid-god. He only lacked personal cultivation. Jianqin had basically left all the divine crystals and pills on him to Xinjian when he entered seclusion. So with Xinjian's talent, becoming a god in 5 years was no problem. However, Xinjian had also used up all the divine crystals after breaking through to god. There was only an insignificant amount left for recovering origin energy. After all, it was impossible to replenish origin energy through the standard method of absorbing the energy in the surroundings here. Once someone ran out of origin energy, they would have to use divine crystals, pills, or recovery heavenly resources to replenish it all. However, Shiyu and the other elders of the Mo clan were unable to calmly accept the fact that Xinjian had become a god so quickly. They had personally witnessed Xinjian attain godhood from reciprocity, yet he had already risen up to god in just a few years. He was like a rocket, stunning them all with his speed. If they had not personally witnessed this, they would have never believed someone could cultivate so quickly no matter what they heard. In particular, Shiyu became filled with extremely mixed feelings. Originally, she had been labeled as a deviant with her talent, but now she realized that she was nothing when she compared herself to Xinjian. Since everyone is ready, let's venture into the dwelling, Jianqin said to everyone before looking around. He found a set of formations that was stood out and directly sent a strand of sword chi towards it with the flying snow sword. There was an immediately boom, which was rather obvious in the quiet dwelling. Jianqin put his sword away after sending out the sword chi. He remained where he was as he waited. Seeing how Jianqin did not go anywhere, Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the deity elders did not move by themselves. They basically all followed Jianqin's lead now. Before long, the illusionary fairy Hao Yu flew over from the depths of the dwelling. She arrived before Jianqin after a while. Fairy Hao Yu, your soul has become even more powerful. Congratulations, said Jianqin. Fairy Hao Yu's soul was now as strong as a deity's. Her soul was only at the origin realm 5 years ago. Fairy Hao Yu ignored his words. she said, "I've gained a basic understanding of this dwelling. The dwelling where Duanmu cultivated is in the very depths, and the formations there are the most powerful. I can't get through them either. There are 3 other regions besides that. They're probably where the 3 disciples of Duanmu cultivated. The formations are weaker there as well. Besides that, there are other formations hidden in the depths of the dwelling. Even overgods will be doomed if they fall into some of the killing formations, while god kings will struggle to break free. As a result, you must be careful as you move through the dwelling. Any carelessness will doom you." Fairy Hao Yu's appearance startled Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the others. They could tell just how weak Fairy Hao Yu was with a single glance, yet she was able to move around the dwelling freely and even understand so much. She had basically moved through the entire dwelling, so they could not help but hold her in high esteem. "Fairy Hao Yu, may I ask if you've seen any other people in the dwelling?" Mo Ling asked nervously. He did not recognize Fairy Hao Yu, so he just copied how Jian Chen had referred to her. Fairy Hao Yu glanced at Mo Ling and said, "You're asking about the ancestors of your 3 clans, right? I did indeed see them. It's all because they smashed through so many formations that I could venture so far in." "Are the ancestors still alive?" Mo Ling asked with great interest. Ando Fu became interested as well. His gaze was fixated on Fairy Hao Yu, and it was also filled with the same eagerness. "They're dead. Their corpses are all in the depths of the dwelling. They died to a killing formation," replied Fairy Hao Yu. Mo Ling and Ando Fu immediately became rather sorrowful when they heard that. Although they had already expected this, they could not help but experience some sorrow once their doubts were confirmed. 2 of the 3 dwellings for God King Duanmu's disciples have been opened up and they've been cleaned out. Only one remains. "I'll take you there," Fairy Hao Yu said to Jian Chen and Shun Jian before leading them into the depths of the dwelling. Very soon, Jian Chen and the others arrived at where the 3rd disciple of God King Duanmu cultivated without any obstructions. Jian Chen discovered a large number of destroyed formations along the way. Every single one of them seemed ancient, clearly left behind by the ancestors of the 3 clans in the past. It was exactly because so many formations had been destroyed that Jian Chen's group was able to move through the dwellings so smoothly. They basically encountered no obstacles at all. According to the ancestor, only this is the place where God King Duanmu's disciple cultivated. The disciple was an overgod and possessed quite impressive achievements in formations. The ancestors had tried to remove these formations in the past, but due to their power, the ancestors would have to devote a tremendous effort to remove them. They were unwilling to devote so much time and energy into doing that, so they never bothered with this place because the items of an overgod were not enough to draw in the ancestors. The other 2 dwellings were presumably where the grand disciples of God King Duanmu cultivated according to the ancestors. As the 2 other grand disciples were only gods, the formations were not powerful, so the ancestors managed to remove all the formations without any difficulty at all. "Everything inside has already been taken away by our 3 clans," Mo Ling explained as he stood before the dwelling. Although they're grand disciples of God King Duanmu, they're much more powerful than Mo Ling and me. There are traces of their cultivation in their dwellings as well as marks for comprehending laws. Comprehending these marks are beneficial to me and Mo Ling and even better for deities. Of course, that would depend on your personal affinity. If you don't have the affinity, you won't benefit at all, added Ando Fu before glancing at the elders of his Ando clan. He really wanted them to go to the dwellings of the grand disciples to cultivate. "Let's get through these formations first." An overgod cast down these formations and they are extremely well designed. Even early overgods would not be able to get through them if they did not understand formations. They're as tough as a steel wall to you lot, but I've found the weakest point in the formations. As long as you all pour your strength together, you might be able to smash through the formation with my assistance, said Fairy Hao Yu. A gleam of light immediately flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. There was an overgod's treasure in there, and it belonged to a disciple of God King Duanmu. It would contain far greater wealth than the abode of any regular overgod. Chapter 1734. An overgod's dwelling, the weakest point of the formation is not fixed. It'll move around as the formation operates, so all of you get ready and listen to me, said Fairy Haoyu. Jian Chen, Shen Jian, Ando Fu, Mo Ling, and the deities all prepared themselves. They all stood in position, discreetly charging up power to launch their strongest attack at any time. Jian Chen and Shun Jian both radiated with powerful sword intent. Standing there, they seemed to have become two divine swords of shocking power. Sword intent permeated the region, contaminating the air and causing it to sharpen. Both of them understood that they were facing against a formation in Overgod cast down. The formation was so powerful that even regular overgods would struggle to break through it, let alone them, who were mere gods. As a result, they all needed to use their full strength this time. 3 meters left of the wall. Strike out now. Fairy Haoyu called out coldly. With that, everyone launched their most powerful attacks simultaneously towards the location Fairy Haoyu specified. There were 2 resplendent streaks of light among the attacks that illuminated the entire dwelling, completely outshining the light from Mo Ling and Ando Fu's attacks. Boom! The attacks from Jian Chen, Shen Jian, Ando Fu, Mo Ling, and the elders of both clans basically struck the place Fairy Haoyu mentioned at the same time. With a huge boom, a powerful wave of energy splayed backwards, pushing the elders all into a constant retreat. They struggled to maintain a stable footing while facing the violent energy. The formation immediately began to shine. Jian Chen, Shen Jian, and the others were all fixated on the formation. However, to their disappointment, the formation stabilized after only shaking a few times after taking on their attacks. Your attacks are too weak. If this is all you have, you won't even be able to obtain what Duanmu's disciple has left behind, let alone reach where Duanmu cultivated, Fairy Haoyu said with a frown. Try again but with battle skills. All deities stand in formation, said Jian Chen. All the deities of the Mo clan and the Ando clan stood in formation, while Mo Ling and Ando Fu prepared their battle skills. 3 inches to the left. Do it. Fairy Haoyu called out. Daluo sword. A will that splits the heavens. The sword shakes and stars shatter. Jian Chen and Shun Jian immediately struck out with their strongest sword technique. Mo Ling and Ando Fu also used their truth tier battle skills while the deities of both clans launched their most powerful attack together. Boom! The attack was clearly much more powerful than the previous one. The formation immediately began to shake as its light flickered rapidly. However, the formation remained undamaged after taking on the attacks from so many people. Fairy Haoyu shook her head gently. She sighed. That's only equivalent to an attack from a peak god. It's still far from overgod. The reason why the attack had reached the level of peak gods was mostly because of Jian Chen and Shen Jian. Even when using truth tier battle skills, the attacks of Mo Ling and Ando Fu could only reach mid-god at most. As for the deities, even when they poured their strength together through their formations, the effects were negligible. It was basically non-existent, and it was only slightly better than not being there at all. Come again, Jian Chen said coldly. With that, a terrifyingly powerful sword intent permeated the surroundings. A finger-sized strand of sword chi had appeared above Jian Chen's head. The eyes of both Mo Ling and Ando Fu narrowed as shock filled their faces. The appearance of the sword chi sent chills down their back. They felt like they had arrived in a cavern of ice, where even their hands and feet felt numb. It was terrifying, just far too terrifying. When Mo Ling and Ando Fu sensed the sword chi that had appeared, they both could not help but feel a sliver of fear inside. Shen Jian's eyes had narrowed as well. He gazed at the tiny sword chi above Jian Chen's head. This was the second time he had seen Jian Chen use this sword chi, except it was far more powerful than the first time this time around. Let alone early gods, but even mid-gods would become stricken with fear before this sword chi. It could even claim the lives of late gods. The sword chi was simply too powerful. Fairy Haoyu could not help but glance at Jian Chen. A smear of anticipation appeared in her eyes, and she said, right in the center. Attack now. Everyone launched their attacks again. They used their strongest battle skills and sword techniques while the profound sword chi hovering above Jian Chen shot out as a streak of white light as well. Boom! This time, the formation finally wavered. It began to shake violently as its light began to flicker. However, it was still not close enough to shatter it. Jian Chen's face turned cold at the sight of this. With a thought, another tiny strand of sword qi appeared over his head. It radiated with great power. The second strand of sword qi was even more powerful than the first. Swish! Before the formation had stabilized, the second strand of sword qi turned into a streak of resplendent light, striking the trembling formation with lightning speed. With a boom, the formation finally cracked after receiving Jian Chen's 2 strands of profound sword qi, despite the fact that even regular gods would struggle to get past it. It had shattered. We're through. We're through. We're through the formation. Mo Ling and Ando Fu were both overjoyed. They were extremely excited. They had been yearning for this dwelling since long ago. They had come here many times with their ancestors in the past. It was nothing difficult with their ancestors' strength as overgods to overcome this formation. It would just take a tremendous effort. However, as the ancestors were unwilling to spend the effort on a dwelling that did not interest them, the formation always remained. They devoted their efforts towards God King Duanmu's legacy instead. As a result, the dwelling that was extremely enticing to them had only been opened up today. The elders of the 2 clans became emotional as well. However, the greatest contributor, Jian Chen, had instead paled. He became haggard and he seemed weak. He had expended far too much energy using the profound sword qi. He could endure using a single strand of profound sword qi at the great perfection of sword origin, but using them consecutively had sapped away all the power of his soul. Chapter 1735. The Pill Room. Even though Mo Ling and Ando Fu were extremely excited and burned with the desire to enter, they did not set foot into the dwelling. Instead, they both looked at Jian Chen. If Jian Chen did not dare to enter, the 2 of them would not be bold enough to enter either. Now that Jian Chen's strength had been gradually revealed, Ando Fu was not the only one who became extremely fearful of him. Even Mo Ling was unable to talk to him as casually as he did in the past. Jian Chen sucked in a deep breath. He endured the dizziness he felt as he carefully made his way into the dwelling. The Overgod's dwelling was expansive and simple. There was a huge, round square. There were several buildings littered around the square, labeled with Pill Room, Pill Refinery, Cultivation Room, Sword Comprehension Building, and Scrolls Pavilion. Jian Chen and Xin Jian both looked towards the Sword Comprehension Building, while Mo Ling and Ando Fu looked between the Pill Room and the Scrolls Pavilion. As for Fairy Hao Yu, she only glanced past these places before losing interest. She did not believe that there would be the items that would assist her in rebuilding her body here. Shen Jian looked away from the Sword Comprehension Building very soon, directing his gaze towards the Pill Room. He said to Jian Chen, "Let's go into the Pill Room and have a look first." "Sure." Jian Chen nodded before making his way over to the Pill Room with Xin Jian. Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the other followed behind them closely. None of them moved by themselves. The Pill Room was also protected by formations, but it was nowhere near as powerful as the one at the entrance. It was only at the level of gods, forming a basic defense. It was obviously not enough to stop them, so they smashed through the formations with ease. The heavy fragrance of pills immediately surged up when they entered the Pill Room. The small room was filled with over 100 jade bottles. They were stored away neatly, creating quite a pleasing sight. Each bottle possessed a label for the pill it stored. Consolidation pills. It's a relatively common pill, with its greatest effect being consolidating your foundation. It has quite a good effect on people with unstable foundations. It can also replenish the vital energies of people slightly. Of course, if the condition is too severe, the pill will be useless. You'll need pills of higher grades, soul-clearing pills. It's a type of pill that stabilizes the soul and has an impressive effect on those with unstable souls. Apart from that, it can be ingested by people who are unable to restrain themselves and might end up suffering from qi deviation to lower the risk. Mo Ling and Ando Fu had both lived for a very long time, so they were obviously rather knowledgeable. They had seen most of the pills in the room, so they began to introduce them. "Titi, these are renewal pills." There are actually renewal pills here. Suddenly, Mo Ling's face changed and immediately became filled with surprise and joy. He immediately grabbed a jade bottle and examined it carefully. He said excitedly, "These renewal pills have reached the 5th grade of the truth tier. Every single one of them is priceless. They can go for 1,000,000 low-grade divine crystals each, or even higher sometimes. They can only be bought in the royal city of the divine kingdom. You can't find them in the provinces." Ando Fu also rushed over and said excitedly, "They really are renewal pills. Renewal pills specialize in recovering origin energy. Every single one of them is priceless, but there's a reason why they're priceless because they're extremely powerful. Even late gods can replenish all their expended origin energy within half a minute of consuming a renewal pill. At crucial times, renewal pills can save lives." What? Even late gods can replenish all their origin energy within half a minute? Jian Chen was also surprised when he heard of the effects. He immediately rushed over. Mo Ling immediately passed the jade bottle to Jian Chen. Jian Chen did not hold back, directly accepting it and opening its lid. He saw 10 pure white and perfectly round pills sitting in there. Each one was the size of a thumb. Jian Chen closed the bottle. Then he searched through the shelves and found that there were actually 6 bottles of the pills in total. Each bottle held 10 pills, resulting in 60 pills in total. In the end, they all came to an agreement for Jian Chen and Shun Jian to each take 2 bottles of the renewal pills each, while Mo Ling and Ando Fu each took 1. Originally, Mo Ling and Ando Fu had refused to take an entire bottle, only asking for 1 or 2 of the pills. After all, it was mainly because of Jian Chen that they could even make it in here. Mo Lin and Ando Fu even suspected that Jian Chen probably could smash through the formation by himself with his 2 strands of profound sword chi even without their help. However, Mo Ling and Ando Fu each took a single bottle in the end after Jian Chen's insistence. Ando Fu's feelings became extremely mixed as he held the bottle of pills. Originally, he believed that he was only Jian Chen's hostage. Even after coming into the God King's dwelling, he was only a tool to open a path. He would not have a share of whatever they found in here. However, he never expected Jian Chen to treat him just like Mo Ling, without any discrimination at all. He had even given him a whole bottle of the precious renewal pills without any hesitation. Revival pills. These are great for healing, having reached the 7th grade of the truth tier. A single pill can go for 1.5 million low-grade divine crystals in the royal city. There are actually 2 bottles here. Fire cloud pills. These are pills that can temporarily strengthen of the person who ingests it. It can forcefully raise their cultivation by a minor level, ignoring the restrictions of the laws of the world. However, they'll suffer an extremely intense backlash as well and become greatly weakened. 1,000-year God origin pills. Each bottle has 10 pills, and there are actually 4 bottles here. Heavens, these are 10,000-year God origin pills. They're even more valuable than the renewal pills. Just the 10,000-year God origin pill in the royal city fetches for a price of 10 million low-grade divine crystals. Ando Fu's shocked voice rang out in Jian Chen's ears. Jian Chen beamed when he heard that there were 10,000-year God origin pills. He arrived before Ando Fu in flash and snatched the bottle from his hands. He opened its lid eagerly. There were also 10 pills inside. "Quick, help me have it look how many bottles of 10,000-year God origin pills there are," Jian Chen said eagerly. These pills were exactly what he needed. "Brother Jian Chen, there's another bottle here. It's also the last bottle. There are only 2 bottles in here." Mo Ling passed a jade bottle to Jian Chen. To no surprise, there were also 10,000-year God origin pills in there. 2 bottles. That's 20 pills. Jian Chen clenched the 2 bottles. He felt extremely joyful as he ignored the intense dizziness in his head. 20 10,000-year God origin pills were equivalent to 200,000 years of cultivation. That could make his chaotic Niden much larger. Even though the 20 pills were not necessarily enough for his chaotic body to advance to the 10th layer, it was enough for him to get 1 step closer to the 10th layer. It could even allow him to reach the peak of the 9th layer. At that time, all he needed to do was consume a few heavenly resources or absorb a few divine crystals, and he would be able to reach the 10th layer successfully. He really is God King Duanmu's disciple after all. Just his pill room contains so many precious pills. His wealth has completely exceeded any other overgod. Mo Ling and Ando Fu sighed in amazement. The disciple of God King Duanmu was much wealthier than their ancestors. Soul recovery pills. These are pills that specialize in recovering the power of the soul. Jianchen, the power of your soul has been greatly consumed, so these pills should be useful to you. Xin Jian walked over with a white jade bottle. Chapter 1736, Soul Recovery Pills. What? There are actually soul recovery pills? Before Jianchen could say anything, both Mo Ling and Ando Fu became astounded. They stared at the bottle in Sun Jian's hand in shock. Jianchen's eyes lit up as well. He had expended a great deal of the power of his soul by using 2 strands of profound sword qi consecutively. He had to endure a sense of dizziness at all times. He was like an ordinary person who had not slept for several days, experiencing a horrible feeling. If the soul recovery pills could really recover the power of his soul, it would be extraordinary. Profound sword qi was Jianchen's greatest weapon right now, as well as his most powerful trump card to protect himself. However, he would basically drain all the power of his soul after using 2 strands of profound sword qi. Before the power of his soul had recovered, he had no more power to use another strand of profound sword qi. If the soul recovery pills could replenish the power of his soul quickly, it would drastically reduce the cooldown time for him to be able to use the profound sword qi again. I just wonder how effective the soul recovery pills are. If they can recover the power of my soul extremely quickly, they'll be of great use to me. They might even save my life, Jianchen thought. Jianchen accepted the jade bottle from Sun Jian, and to no surprise, there were 10 pills in there. Jianchen poured one of the perfectly round pills in the center of his palm without any hesitation. He studied it while eagerness flashed through his eyes. They really are soul recovery pills. They really are. It's exactly the same as the records have specified. It can't be wrong with this unique smell. I never thought we'd find a treasure like soul recovery pills in here, Ando Fu said joyfully. Ancestor, you were too careless. This is nothing close to a regular overgod's dwelling. The things in here are so valuable that they completely exceed what regular late overgods could possess. It even possesses pills that would be extremely beneficial to you. You shouldn't have given up on this dwelling in the past, Mo Ling said with regret and remorse. Jianchen became even more overjoyed after hearing the words of Mo Ling and Ando Fu. He studied the pill with much interest and murmured, "Looks like this soul recovery pill is pretty valuable." You don't understand, brother Jianchen. Soul recovery pills aren't just valuable. They're priceless because only great pill masters can refine this type of pill, and the resources that go into refining one are priceless. In a rural place like our divine kingdom of Pingtian, there aren't any of these pills for sale at all. And even if they do appear for sale, they can't be purchased with low-grade divine crystals. You'll need high-grade or even supreme-grade divine crystals, Mo Ling explained to Jianchen. Soul recovery pills really are impressive. They are one of the few pills that can recover the power of the soul and are even quite useful to God Kings. A single pill is basically worth around 100,000 high-grade divine crystals. I've heard that the most expensive type can reach up to 500,000 high-grade divine crystals, added Fairy Hao Yu. What? A single pill is worth 100,000 high-grade divine crystals? It's that valuable? Jianchen and Sun Jian both leapt in fright when they heard that. 100,000 high-grade divine crystals were equivalent to 10 million mid-grade divine crystals. Jianchen's hand trembled for a moment. The pill was just too valuable. Even with his mental fortitude, he struggled to remain calm. All the wealth he had taken from the Lu family and the Ando clan did not even amount to a single pill. Jianchen immediately gave up on the thought of ingesting one of the pills. He placed the pill back into its bottle without any hesitation. Eating a single soul recovery pill was equivalent to spending 10 billion mid-grade divine crystals, or a billion low-grade divine crystals. That was basically just wasting it. Thinking back to the past, he did not even have enough divine crystals to buy the flying snow sword in Maple Leaf City. Jianchen, I'd advise you to consume a pill immediately so that you can recover your peak condition as soon as possible. There must be quite a few people gathered outside. Who knows when they'll enter, suggested Fairy Hao Yu. That's right. Right now's not the time to act sparingly. We can't waste too much time, Shen Jian said as well. Jian Chen hesitated slightly after listening to the two of them. In the end, he made up his mind and consumed a pill. As soon as the soul recovery pill reached his stomach, Jian Chen felt a cool presence rise up directly into his soul. The power of his soul replenished rapidly, and in just a few seconds he had recovered it all. At the same time, not all of the pill had been consumed after completely replenishing Jian Chen's soul. It turned into a cool presence that was hidden within his soul. Once he consumed some of the power of his soul, it would be replenished immediately. What a wondrous pill! Jian Chen could not help but sigh in amazement. A single soul recovery pill can even replenish all the power of an overgod soul. You'll need several or even several dozen for a god king, said Fairy Hao Yu. The power of Jian Chen's soul had not reached overgod yet, so a single pill was more than enough to replenish everything. However, as his strength increased, the power of his soul would grow as well. At that time, he would definitely use several of the pills if he wanted to recover the power of his soul completely. This was all because the amount of power a soul recovery pill could replenish was a set number. Afterwards, Jian Chen gave Mo Ling and Ando Fu a single pill each, completely moving them. They were utterly ecstatic. Jian Chen divided the remaining pills evenly between him and Shen Jian. It's a fantastic pill, but it's a pity that there's only a single bottle. Jian Chen sighed gently after putting the pills away. He felt slightly regretful. If only there were a few bottles more. Afterwards, Jian Chen and the others found no other extraordinarily pills in the pill room. Most of them were just common types. In the end, they spent almost an hour to clear out all the bottles in the pill room. Aside from the 10,000-year god origin pills, Jian Chen gave a portion of everything to Mo Ling and Ando Fu. Even the elders did not leave empty-handed. Jian Chen, I will remember your kindness. If I get the chance, I will definitely return it, Ando Fu announced on the spot seriously. He had never seen such a great person in the world before. Under the situation where he was at a complete disadvantage in strength, Jian Chen still split a lot of the precious pills with him despite Ando Fu technically being a hostage. If it was another person, Ando Fu was certain they would never give him any at all. They might have even killed him directly. Brother Jian Chen is a true gentleman. It is my fortune to know someone like Brother Jian Chen, Mo Ling sighed emotionally. If the Ando clan, Lu family, or Mo Ling found the pills instead, they would probably immediately begin fighting over the pills. This was because the pills were just too precious. Even ignoring the priceless soul recovery pills that could not even be found in the divine kingdom of Pingtian, just the 10,000-year god origin pills were valuable enough, not to mention the other valuable pills that were present as well. Jian Chen's group walked out of the pill room before entering the pill refinery, cultivation room, and scrolls pavilion. There was only an ancient pill cauldron within the pill refinery. It was of quite a high quality, so Jian Chen obviously took it with him. The cultivation room was completely empty, without anything at all. The scrolls pavilion only possessed a few cultivation methods and battle skills as well as the notes of the dwelling's owner in regards to cultivation. The notes came from a mere overgod. Jian Chen glanced through them casually before giving them to Mo Ling and Ando Fu. In regards to the cultivation methods and battle skills, Jian Chen let Mo Ling and Ando Fu pick one for themselves before taking the rest for himself. Although the cultivation methods and battle skills did not catch the eyes of Jian Chen and Shen Jian, they could be sold for quite a good price. In the end, Jian Chen's group entered the Sword Comprehension Building. Chapter 1737. The Sword Comprehension Building. The Sword Comprehension Building was actually a stone hut with 2 floors. The stone walls were extremely smooth and were like a polished mirror. They were flawless. However, Jian Chen and Shen Jian could tell with a single glance that a sharp and brutal sword intent had slowly ground flat all the walls. After the two of them entered the stone hut, they could not help but feel like they had entered a powerful sword. Soaring sword intent was present everywhere. This is its sword spirit. It's its sword spirit at the very least. Jian Chen's heart shivered when he sensed the sword intent that was present everywhere. He felt a suffocating pressure in the stone hut. It was the pressure that came from the laws of the sword. He had already reached the great perfection of sword origin, so the only way he could feel pressured by the laws of the sword was from the realm beyond that sword spirit. Suddenly, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. There was an extremely sharp sword qi on the face of one of the walls. He could not help but shudder when he saw the sword qi. He seemed to feel the sword qi shoot out directly towards him. Jian Chen felt like he was a tiny boat within a surging ocean before the sword qi, where he could be swallowed at any time. He felt as weak as an ant before the sword qi. Even though he had reached the great perfection of sword origin, he was still so weak. Jian Chen stood as still as a mountain. His calm eyes exploded brightly at that moment as if two streaks of light had shot out from his eyes, directly colliding with the sword intent that radiated his way. He was a swordsman himself, and he possessed an extremely great talent for the way of the sword. How could he be defeated by the sword intent? Even when he knew he was not its opponent, Jian Chen would never just sit around idly. He counterattacked fearlessly. Jian Chen seemed to hear a rumble in his sea of consciousness under his full-powered resistance. Vaguely, he seemed to feel like he had broken through some sort of shackles, emptying his entire mind and soul. He had entered a wondrous state. Dazed, he seemed to see a hazy image. Within the image, a person in green robes stood within the hut with his back to Jian Chen. He radiated with a supreme presence, which possessed sword intent that was so powerful that it even shocked Jian Chen. The man slowly raised the sword in his hand. Immediately, surging sword qi emerged from the sword. He stabbed out casually. The strike seemed to follow a trajectory of the ways of the world. It contained the wonders of the laws of the world. The single strike contained devastating power. Jian Chen felt the entire world clear up the moment the person stabbed out. The strike had completely filled his mind and soul, becoming the only thing in the world in his eyes. It absorbed his entire mind. He could even clearly sense all the minute changes in the strike. Jian Chen could not help but close his eyes in the stone hut. His mind had already sunk into the wonders of the strike uncontrollably, comprehending it closely. He was comprehending the sword. Shen Jian had also closed his eyes, entering a state where he was no longer aware of himself. He went through the same thing as Jian Chen. Fairy Hao Yu glanced at Jian Chen and Shen Jian. At the same time, she said to Mo Ling and Ando Fu through a communication technique, "You leave first. Don't disturb the two of them." Ando Fu and Mo Ling also glanced at the slash on the wall subconsciously. Unfortunately, they found nothing. Their eyes could not discern anything. The sword qi was clearly only for guiding people. It could not injure people, so only those who had also comprehended the laws of the sword could comprehend it. Mo Ling and Ando Fu did not walk the way of the sword, so the slash was obviously useless to them. Ando Fu and Mo Ling left the place silently. They planned to search through the final stone room. As they had no idea how long Jian Chen and Shen Jian would take, the elders of the two clans all went to the dwellings of God King Duanmu's grand disciples to not waste their precious time in here. There were the marks for comprehending laws in there, and they just happened to be able to benefit from it as deities. I hope you can break through in the laws of the sword. The path ahead will be even tougher, and the formations will be even more powerful. Even if I can find the weak points, you can't break through it with your current strength. Only by becoming stronger can you advance to where Duanmu cultivates. Fairy Hao Yu murmured to herself as she stared at Jian Chen and Shen Jian, who had entered selfless states of comprehension. She could only wait now. The formations leading towards God King Duanmu's residence were even tougher. If the formations were not destroyed, she would not be able to enter either. Whether they could make it to the depths would completely depend on Jian Chen and Shen Jian. Suddenly, Fairy Hao Yu's eyes narrowed. She suddenly turned her head towards the entrance of the dwelling. The space there actually rippled slightly. Fairy Hao Yu frowned and said grimly, "Looks like the people outside will enter very soon. There's not much time left." Currently, a deafening boom had echoed outside God King Duanmu's dwelling. Several dozen overgods stood in a group as they destroyed formations around the entrance. Each formation was extremely powerful. They were enough to deal with or even kill overgods, so the destruction of several dozen of these formations created an astounding disturbance. It actually made the space there distort. Now, the number of overgods that had gathered before the entrance had increased to over 50, while the divine kingdoms that took part had increased from the initial 4 to 7. At the very front of them stood a sagely old man with gray hair. He held a formation disc that bore the 8 trigrams as he stared at the exploding formations. The overgods gathered there all treated the old man politely. They all behaved very modestly. This was because the old man was a famed formation master they had invited. Not only was he prestigious, but he was powerful as well, having reached late overgod. He was known as Master Chanlong. It was also this Master Chanlong who came up with the idea of casting down several powerful formations around the entrance of God King Duanmu's dwelling before exploding them. It formed a powerful attack that barraged the space there in an attempt to force out the entrance hidden. Just a little more. Do it again. This time, the entrance to the dwelling will definitely appear, Master Chanlong said leisurely while hovering in the air. Under the personal lead of Master Chanlong, the overgods who had studied some formations before all began to cast down the formations. A few days later, Master Chanlong had finally finished casting down all the formations with the efforts of several dozen overgods. This time, there were over 100 formations, and every single one of them was at the level of overgods. Several thousand meters from there, the young man with a fan lay comfortably on a lounge. His eyes were closed as if he was sleeping. 2 beauties bent over beside him, carefully massaging his shoulders and legs. They worked extremely diligently. The 2 women were not weak. They were both deities. Let alone the Dong'an province, deities were even powerful existences in the entire divine kingdom of Pingtian, yet they could only afford to massage a young man who was only a god. Even overgods could not enjoy something like this because even in clans with overgods, deities possessed extraordinary statuses. They could never be used like servants. However, the 2 girls showed no unhappiness or reluctance at all. Instead, both of them were extremely joyful, as if massaging the young man was something they enjoyed very much. At this moment, the young man who seemed to be sleeping opened his eyes. He yawned lazily and glanced ahead sleepily. He said rather unhappily, "Why have they still not opened the dwelling up? Uncle Chin, how long have I been cultivating for?" "Young master, you've already been cultivating for 5 years, the burly man behind the young man replied. Chapter 1738. The entrance appears. The young man sat up slowly. He spread his fingers and opened the fan in his hands with a thwop. He gently fanned himself as he gazed at the several dozen overgods who had cast down formations under Master Chanlong's instructions. Interest immediately flooded his eyes again, and he said, "Uncle Chin, do you think they can force out the entrance this time?" The burly man shook his head gently. "Although it's not a bad idea, it's still a little too little to force out the entrance hidden in space." Duanmu comprehended the laws of the sword and the laws of space. He had basically reached the limits of God King with them, so it'll be difficult for these overgods to force out the entrance he hid. The young man stood up from the lounge lazily. He stretched a little before glancing at the 2 beautiful deities standing obediently to one side. He could not help but smile indifferently, and with a flip of his hand, a jade bottle appeared in his hand. The burly man glared at the young man when he saw the jade bottle, and the muscles on his face twitched unnaturally. The young man poured out 2 pills from the bottle, and the pills floated slowly towards the 2 women under an invisible force. The 2 women both looked at the pills excitedly. "I am a man of my word. Since you've served me for 5 years, I would never mistreat you. Here are 2 10,000-year god origin pills, 1 each," the young man said indifferently. He was extremely lavish. There was only a single 10,000-year god origin pill in the entire divine kingdom of Pingtian, and it had been brought over from another divine kingdom by the divine king. It was so expensive that it still had not been sold. Even though there were extremely great disadvantages to consuming 10,000-year god origin pills, there was a second reason why the pill had not been sold, which was its price. "Thank you, young master." "Thank you." The 2 women thanked him. They were in especially good spirits. They carefully put the pill away like a treasure. "All right, you two can go. Go do whatever you have to do. I'll let you go early," the young man said as he fluttered his fan. The two women thanked him again and no longer remained. They left happily. They had used just 5 years to obtain a precious 10,000-year god origin pill. It was just too worth it of a deal for them. They felt like the pills had basically fallen into their laps. "Young master, how come I don't remember when you obtained the 10,000-year god origin pills? And with your talent, the clan would never give you pills like that. Have you secretly snuck into Elder Gu's pill room?" Uncle Chin asked after the two women had left. The young man closed his fan in a single moment and glanced at Uncle Chin with guilt. He said, "Of course not. Uncle Chin, you're thinking too much. Not to mention that even you would struggle to enter Elder Gu's pill room, so how would I get in there, right? Then where did your 10,000-year god origin pills come from?" All right. Uncle Chin, let's not talk about the pills anymore. Aren't they just 10,000-year god origin pills? With my status, getting them is a piece of cake. The young man cut off Uncle Chin. Then he looked away and stared at the entrance to God King Duanmu's dwelling. He said, "Even with so many people, they've still failed to make the entrance appear after 5 years. I don't have that much time to wait for them. Uncle Chin, go help them out. If they continue like this, they'll just be wasting my time." Uncle Chin glanced at the young man rather helplessly and nodded slightly. "Blow up the formations." It was also at this moment that Master Chanlong's voice rang out. Soon, a series of thunderous booms followed. The formations cast down around the entrance had all been blown up, forming a powerful attack that ripped at the space there. The space immediately trembled gently. However, it was still a little lacking for the terrifying attack from the explosion of so many overgod-level formations to rip open the space there. It was also in the moment that the formations had been blown up that the Uncle Chin beside the young man moved. He only extended a finger towards the entrance gently. His action immediately created a series of ripples in the space before him silently. His movement seemed extremely ordinary, just like a mortal casually raising a finger. However, it managed to move the space there. However, everyone's attention was gathered on the dwelling at that time. No one had noticed Uncle Chin's actions. It was also with Uncle Chin's movement that the space around the entrance to the dwelling shook violently. Space seemed to rip open there, revealing a stone door hidden in space. The powerful attack from the explosion of several dozen formations struck the stone door and failed to move it at all. "The entrance has appeared. It's the entrance to God King Duanmu's dwelling. Master Chanlong really is a master of formations after all. You really are impressive to have actually forced out the entrance of the dwelling. Master Chanlong, you have my admiration." The overgods nearby all praised Master Chanlong. Meanwhile, Master Chanlong smiled deeply with the 8 trigrams disc in one hand as he stroked his white beard with the other. His face was filled with confidence. The young man also smiled deeply when he saw this from afar. "There's another powerful formation on the stone door. Master Chanlong, please assist us in getting through it. Master Chanlong, we'll all be depending on you." The surrounding overgods all asked Master Chanlong to continue breaking through the formations. They spoke even more politely than before. As long as the entrance has appeared, the formations will be much easier to deal with. Any formation cannot lose its source of energy. As long as you drain its source of energy, any formation will fall apart by itself no matter how powerful it is. "Allow me to find the weakness of this formation," Master Chanlong said loudly. He arrived before the stone door with his chest held high as he stared at the door with much focus. The moment the entrance to the dwelling appeared, the space within the dwelling trembled gently as if it had received a powerful attack. Fairy, how you gazed in the direction of the entrance from outside the Sword Comprehension building. She became grim and murmured, "The remaining time is only decreasing." Chapter 1739. Sword Spirit. In the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. A gleam of light suddenly flashed through the eyes of Master Chanlong, who had been devoting himself to studying the formation outside God King Duanmu's dwelling. He said, "Right here? Everyone attack here with your full strength." Without any hesitation, The several dozen overgods all struck out at the point of weakness specified by Master Chanlong. Even though it was a weak point, the formation was still one God King Duanmu personally cast down after all. Smashing through it as overgods was not an easy feat. The several dozen overgods barraged the point of weakness crazily for 10 days and nights straight. Only then was the formation destroyed. However, the stone gate remained closed. The light of formations continued to flicker outside. There was more than a single formation there. There are a total of 18 formations on this stone door. There's 17 left, so allow me to study and try to predict the features of this second formation. Master Chanlong swung his sleeves and continued to study the formation by squatting before it. This person is quite accomplished with formations. If this continues, the formations cast down by Duanmu will be destroyed sooner or later, Uncle Qin said calmly from afar. A year later, 8 of the 18 formations had been destroyed. Only 10 remained, blocking everyone from entering. At the same time, Shen Jian awakened from his state of comprehension within God King Duanmu's dwelling. With the period of comprehension, his way of the sword had reached the great perfection of sword origin. On the other hand, Jian Chen remained in his state of comprehension and had not roused. Shen Jian did not disturb Jian Chen. He walked out of the stone hut silently. The longer a person spent comprehending, the more they would benefit. Jian Chen's way of the sword had already reached the great perfection of sword origin before him. He had been comprehending for longer as well, so coupled with Jian Chen's talent, Shen Jian realized that Jian Chen was probably making a breakthrough with the way of the sword. Afterwards, Shen Jian sat down outside the building. Then he placed the Cloudstream sword on his knees and formed seals with his hands. He began to cultivate again. Without much delay, a mysterious power began to radiate from him. In the end, it gradually turned into translucent specks of light, flickering as they revolved around him. The glimmering specks of light seemed to form a star chart of the night sky. Shen Jian was a huge giant who currently sat within a galaxy. His cultivation had reached the level of gods, so he had fulfilled the conditions required to grasp the second move of a will that splits the heavens. Although he had used the move in the battle against the evil spirit once in the past, he had paid a huge price to forcefully use it. Not only was its power reduced, but it did not possess the core essence of the move. He was nowhere near grasping the essence of the move back then. As a result, he needed to carefully comprehend the second move after becoming a god. This battle skill is of quite a high grade. Looks like Shen Jian has also inherited the legacy of someone great, or it would be impossible for him to learn such a high-grade battle skill. At the same time, his sword is nowhere near as simple as it seems. Fairy How You stared at Shen Jian from the distance and the light in her eyes flickered. Just like this, another half a year passed. Suddenly, a powerful sword intent appeared within the sword comprehension building. Sword Qi currently revolved around Jian Chen, who stood inside the stone hut. The sword Qi were finger-sized and silver-white, swimming around happily like little fishies. Compared to the sword Qi Jian Chen previously used, this sword Qi was no longer as rigid. Instead, it seemed more intelligent, as if each strand of sword Qi possessed its own life. Jian Chen had finally made a breakthrough in his way of the sword after this period of comprehension, formally advancing to sword spirit. That's the comprehension of an overgod's laws of the world. Gleams of light flickered through Fairy How Yu's eyes when she sensed the disturbance in the building. She was quite surprised. Jian Chen's comprehension of the laws of the world had already become equivalent to an overgod's now. Jian Chen's affinity for comprehension even makes me a little jealous, Fairy How You said rather emotionally. Jian Chen was still a cultivator at sainthood when she first met him on the Tianyuan continent. He had not even comprehended the laws of the world back then. Only so much time had passed since then, yet he had made his way up, step by step, to an expert that was equivalent to an overgod now. The only aspect he lacked in was his personal cultivation. It was too low. The 9th layer of the chaotic body was only equivalent to a deity. Even with the entire saint's world in perspective, there was probably only Jian Chen who possessed the cultivation of a deity and the comprehension of an overgod. This was because it was just too difficult for his chaotic body to progress to a new layer. He required tremendous amounts of cultivation resources. The sword qi in Jian Chen's surroundings settled down very soon. However, he did not make his way out of the building. Instead, he directly went to the second floor. The second floor was extremely spacious as well. There was a stone table in the center with a scroll on it. Jian Chen arrived before the stone table and looked around carefully. Only after confirming that there were no dangers did he pick up the scroll and slowly unfurl it. Jian Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed the moment he unfurled the scroll. He felt like the scroll was enlarging right before his eyes, becoming boundless in the blink of an eye. It had transformed into a world with mountains and rivers, while he himself stood in a world like that. A green-robed, middle-aged man had appeared silently before him. The middle-aged man stood tall and straight. His appearance was dashing. He possessed sharp eyebrows that were as straight as swords and eyes that shone like stars. He radiated with surging sword intent. The sword intent was so powerful that even Jian Chen, who had reached sword spirit, felt greatly pressured. God King Duanmu? Jian Chen shuddered. Even though he had never seen the man before him before, he was extremely certain that the man was the owner of the dwelling, the supreme God King Duanmu. However, this was not God King Duanmu's true body. It was just an image he had left behind. God King Duanmu probably used the scroll to teach his disciple, thought Jian Chen. At this moment, God King Duanmu began to use the sword in the empty space. His style of the sword was swift and brutal. Every single strike contained sharp sword qi. All the attacks were extremely terrifying. Whenever he stabbed out, the sword seemed to follow the natural trajectories of the world. It seemed to have fused with the world, possessing the power of laws. This was a scroll God King Duanmu left behind to pass on his ways. He had engraved all his comprehension of the laws of the sword into the scroll, passing it on selflessly. The person he wanted to pass it to was not Jian Chen but his disciple. It was just that Jian Chen had touched the disciple today, so he was brought into this illusionary world instead. Naturally, he was treated as God King Duanmu's disciple. After all, the scroll was only a scroll. It did not possess any consciousness. It was naturally unable to tell who was who. Jian Chen remained in the illusionary world as he devoted all his attention to God King Duanmu's sword techniques. It seemed like his mind had sunken into it as he closely comprehended every single detail of God King Duanmu's usage of the laws of the sword. God King Duanmu's sword style doesn't only contain the way of the sword, but the laws of space as well. Jian Chen realized something and became filled with admiration. Not only were God King Duanmu's accomplishments in the laws of the sword impressive, but his laws of space had reached an extremely profound level as well. Chapter 1740. A tight situation. Originally, I comprehended the laws of space as well, but they were ripped away from me by the sword spirits so that I could focus on the way of the sword. If I comprehended other ways while comprehending the way of the sword, it'll just waste my time and effort. It'll indefinitely delay when I can reach the highest realm of the way of the sword, Jian Chen thought. He agreed to what the sword spirits had done very much. He really would be able to reach the highest realm of the way of the sword by devoting all his time to it. If he had to comprehend other ways while comprehending the way of the sword, it would waste quite a lot of time. Although a few supreme experts in both the saints' world and the immortals' world had grasped more than a single way, most of them would comprehend their first way to the absolute limit and reach the apex of the world first. After that, they would start comprehending other ways. Even if any accidents happened to them, they would be able to protect themselves. If a person began comprehending several ways right from the start, they would have to spend quite a lot of time and energy on each way. No matter how great their talent was, they would have to spend quite a long time before they managed to reach the apex. It was extremely likely for them to die during that time due to various reasons. There were quite a few prodigies who died before achieving great strength in both the immortals' world and the saints' world. I don't know the laws of space anymore, so I'll ignore God King Duanmu's laws of space. I'll just comprehend his way of the sword. Jian Chen cleared his mind and began paying close attention. Jian Chen completely lost his sense of time. When God King Duanmu finally stopped using the sword, his figure faded gradually and vanished in just a few seconds. Jian Chen's mind also receded from the scroll. The scroll in his hand had closed up automatically. At the same time, he discovered that Xinjian had arrived beside him at a certain time. This scroll will be of great use to us. You have a look. I need to go into seclusion immediately. Jian Chen passed the scroll to Xinjian before leaving the building to go to the cultivation room. Xinjian's mind was also sucked into the scroll's world when he opened it like Jian Chen. He experienced the same thing. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. Jian Chen finally emerged, and when he did, he had completely digested all his comprehension from God King Duanmu's usage of the sword, which deepened his comprehension of the way of the sword some more. Even though he still remained at the minor achievement of sword spirit, he had taken a great step towards partial achievement without a doubt, and he was now closer than before. Shen Jian benefited greatly from the scroll as well. Although he remained at the great perfection of sword origin, he was even closer to sword spirit now. Of course, they could comprehend so much from the scroll God King Duanmu left behind completely because of their talent and aptitude for comprehension. The better they were at comprehending, the more they would benefit obviously. If a person with no special aptitude had obtained God King Duanmu's scroll instead, they would not benefit at all even if they glanced through it 1,000 times. Even if the most basic method of passing on ways was present before a person with bad aptitude, they would not be able to benefit from it at all. As soon as they emerged from the cultivation room, Jian Chen frowned. He looked towards the entrance of the dwelling. That was where they had come in from, and it actually rumbled from that direction. You've sensed it as well. It's the people outside attacking the entrance. They'll enter before long. Fairy How you arrived before Jian Chen and said sternly. Jian Chen became stern as well. Although his strength had increased drastically after reaching sword spirit, he also understood that the people gathered outside would be a large group of overgods. Jian Chen was able to achieve invincibility among those below overgod with his current strength, but he still stood no chance of victory against overgods. This was because all overgods had comprehended the same amount of the laws of the world as him, at the very least. There were even a few overgods who had comprehended more than him. Jian Chen possessed no advantage in the laws of the world before overgods. His personal cultivation was a huge disadvantage in the first place, so as soon as they began fighting, he would definitely suffer defeat. A thought flashed through Jian Chen's mind. Suddenly, he gritted his teeth, and with a flip of his hand, 2 jade bottles appeared from his space ring. They were labeled 10,000-year God Origin Pills. I can only consume these pills in the current situation. It's a pity that I only have 20 of these pills. I wonder if 20 will be enough for me to reach the 10th layer of the chaotic body, Jian Chen said gruffly. He could only consume the pills sooner than he had initially planned now that he faced the threat of so many overgods. Only when he was even stronger could he protect himself before these overgods. Jian Chen turned around and entered the cultivation room again to continue his seclusion. However, he did not comprehend the way of the sword this time. Instead, he ingested the pills to increase his personal strength. Jian Chen sat in the gloomy room. He poured out a pill from the bottle and swallowed it without any hesitation. As soon as the pill reached his stomach, it turned into an extremely violent energy that exploded within Jian Chen. Jian Chen did not feel like he had consumed a pill but a bomb. The energy was so violent that if weaker people with more fragile bodies had consumed it instead, they probably would have been blown into pieces in an instant. However, Jian Chen cultivated the chaotic body. Even if the effects of the pill were several times more brutal, he could still withstand it, as the toughness of the cultivator's body was one of the greatest advantages of the chaotic body. Jian Chen directly ignored any future problems the pills could cause and devoured all 20 pills one by one. They wreaked havoc in his body as violent energy that was gradually refined into chaotic force. The chaotic Niden in his dantian grew bit by bit as well. Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the elders of both clans all gathered outside the cultivation room. Every single one of them was worried. The disturbances from the entrance were only increasing, where even they could sense it with their strength. All of them became uneasy. After all, they were the people who had entered the dwelling first. Once the overgods made it in here, they would definitely suspect that their group had obtained a lot of good things, so the overgods would never let them go. A month later, Jianchen consumed all 20 10,000-year god origin pills. However, to his disappointment, they failed to allow him to break through to the 10th layer. Chapter 1741. Skeletons of Overgods. Jianchen left the cultivation room with a heavy heart. The amount of energy he required to go from the 9th layer to the 10th layer of the chaotic body was just too extravagant. 20 10,000-year god origin pills were not enough. He estimated that he would require 80 of the pills at the very least. Although he still had a few of the heavenly resources he had found in the Xianhuang microcosm on him, he would not be able to reach the 10th layer even if he ingested all of them, as the remaining gap to the 10th layer was just too vast. He could not ingest too many of the heavenly resources, as his body would develop resistance, and their effects would be greatly reduced. If he was close to the 10th layer, he could consider ingesting them. Shun Jian, Ando Fu, Mo Ling, and the elders of the two clans had all gathered there already when Jianchen emerged from the room. The growing disturbances at the entrance of the dwelling had alarmed all of them. They were all extremely grim. The people outside will be entering very soon. We must proceed further into the dwelling, Shin Jian said grimly. God King Duanmu's dwelling was very large, but there was nowhere for people to hide. Once the people outside made their way in, they would definitely inspect every inch of the dwelling. Their group would not be able to hide from overgods. Brother Jianchen, we've collected everything in the stone room, whether they're useful or not. We've put them all away into a space ring. Aside from that, there are a few divine crystals in the room. They're all high grade. Mo Ling handed a space ring to Jianchen. Jianchen checked through the space ring and found that it was filled with various random things. Most of them did not have any functional purpose at all and was just decor that was pleasant to the eye. There were even gold and silver coins that only possessed value to people of the secular world. Naturally, Jianchen had no interest in those things, so after checking through it all quickly, he found the divine crystals Mo Ling had mentioned. There were not many divine crystals, only 3 pieces. However, each piece was frightening large, even stunning Jianchen. The standard size for a divine crystal was thumb-sized, 1 centimeter long, high, and wide. However, the 3 divine crystals were all 1 meter cubes. Jianchen took out a divine crystal. He could not help but sigh in amazement as he stared at this large piece. The largest high-grade divine crystal he had seen before was only the size of a head, yet the divine crystals before him had already exceeded that by several dozen times. This is a block of divine crystals. A block of divine crystals is 1 meter in length, width, and depth. If you break it up, a block of divine crystals is worth 1,000,000 of the standard divine crystals. Some deals involving large sums often use divine crystals like this. Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out. Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the elders all looked at the block of divine crystals enviously. To them, just high-grade divine crystals were rather rare, let alone a piece so large. However, they understood that even though they coveted the divine crystal, they could only look and not touch it. It would not end up with them in the end. With our current level of cultivation, using high-grade divine crystals to cultivate is just too wasteful. I feel like we should wait till we get out and exchange all these high-grade divine crystals for mid-grade divine crystals. It'll be more beneficial for our cultivation, said Xinjian. High-grade divine crystals were commonly used by overgods. Mid-grade divine crystals were more than enough for them, who were gods. Low-grade divine crystals were basically used by people below God. Their effects would become negligible to gods. Shenzhen had consumed quite a number of low-grade divine crystals to become a god in the past. Even if all 3 blocks of high-grade divine crystals were given to him now, he would not be able to reach mid-god. As a result, it was better for them to keep the divine crystals and exchange them for mid-grade ones once they got out of here. A block of high-grade divine crystal was equivalent to 1,000,000 standard high-grade divine crystals. If they were exchanged for mid-grade divine crystals, a single block of high-grade divine crystals would be worth 100 million mid-grade divine crystals. On the other hand, 100 million mid-grade divine crystals were enough for Xinjian to become a mid-god. Since our strength won't increase even if we use up these 3 blocks of divine crystals, why not let them be for now? We can exchange them after we get out. Jianchen nodded and placed the blocks of divine crystal back into the space ring. Bang! At this moment, a heavy sound rang out from the entrance. The sound was even more intense than before, and the space at the entrance twisted violently as well. Looks like the people outside have smashed through another formation. We can't waste any more time. Let's leave immediately for the depths, Fairy Hao Yu said grimly. The current situation was becoming more and more pressing. Everyone no longer hesitated and immediately set off. They advanced towards the very depths. That was where God King Duanmu cultivated. The formations became more and more powerful as they made their way towards where God King Duanmu cultivated. They had even gradually exceeded the level of Overgod and reached God King. Even though the 3 Overgods had destroyed the formations they came across along the way, the residual fragments still radiated with terrifying power, causing their hearts to beat constantly as they moved through. They were filled with anxiety as their vigilance had been raised to the absolute maximum. Very soon, Jianchen discovered 3 skeletons ahead. They were covered by a thin layer of dust, and it was clear that they had been dead for many years already. Ancestor! Mo Ling and Ando Fu could not help but quiver violently at the sight of the 3 skeletons. Both of them dropped to their knees as sorrow filled their faces. After so many years, this was the first time they had seen the remains of their ancestors. Although they had entered the dwelling in the past, they had not dared to venture too far in due to their limited strength. Jianchen also saw the 3 skeletons, and his feelings became mixed. After all, they had been 3 overgods in the past. They had expended tremendous effort to obtain God King Duanmu's jade, the key to God King Duanmu's dwelling, but in the end, they failed to benefit from it at all and died in the dwelling instead. That's a hidden killing formation. The 3 of them entered it accidentally, so they were slain. Let's make our way around it, said Fairy Hao Yu. She was at the very front of the group, guiding everyone through. Mo Ling and Ando Fu endured their sadness and bowed towards the remains from afar. Afterwards, they made their way around the place behind Jianchen. They both knew that their ancestors' skeletons had been trapped in the killing formation. They were unable to take the skeletons away or even approach the place. After advancing a few hundred meters, everyone stopped once again. The formation blocked their way. This formation is extremely powerful. I don't know whether you can get through it. I'll find the weakness of the formation and all of you try attacking it with your full strength, said Fairy Hao Yu. She stared at the formation and studied it for a while before she suddenly extended her right hand, 3 inches to the southeast. Attack! Chapter 1742. A gathering of overgods along with Fairy Hao Yu's voice, Jianchen and everyone else struck out with their full strength at the same time. The deities all stood in formation as they launched their most powerful attack. Ando Fu and Mo Ling forced out all the power they had, using their most powerful battle skills to attack the weakness of the formation. Stars glimmered around Xinjian. As he stabbed out as hard as he could with the Cloud Stream sword, a galaxy filled with shining stars appeared. A pure and powerful force surged out from the galaxy, embedded onto the Cloud Stream sword. It shot out as a powerful strand of sword qi. Shenzhen had used the second move of a will that splits the heavens that he had recently comprehended without any hesitation. The sword extends and galaxies extinguish. This time, it was clearly much more powerful than when he used it against the evil spirit. Even late gods would be doomed before his attack unless they were prodigies as well. 2 finger-sized, silver-white sword qi appeared above Jianchen's head, and they surged with sword intent. With a thought, the 2 strands of profound sword qi shot out at the same time. They moved extremely fast as if they had exceeded the speed of lightning, striking the weak point Fairy Hao Yu had specified in a single instance. Everyone had basically launched their most powerful attacks at the same time. With a great boom, the terrifying shockwave of energy forced back Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the elders. In particular, all the elders spurted blood from their mouths as they paled. As Jianchen had used 2 strands of profound sword qi at the same time, the attack had reached the level of overgods. Just the shockwaves of energy had heavily wounded the deity elders, and it even forced Mo Ling and Ando Fu to constantly retreat. When the violent energies gradually dispersed, everyone's faces became extraordinarily ugly. They had used their most powerful attacks without holding back at all, and this even included their greatest trump cards. However, the formation remained intact. Sigh. Looks like this is our limit. Fairy Hao Yu sighed gently when she saw this. She was filled with frustration. Jianchen became rather dejected as well. The formations in the path to God King Duanmu's cultivation area was unimaginably powerful. Even after growing stronger in the dwelling, he was still far from being able to smash through the formations there. Boom! At this moment, the entire dwelling basically rumbled. Violent streams of energy appeared in the distance, causing all their faces to become extremely ugly again. Including Jianchen, everyone felt an intense pressure from the ripples of energy. Even late gods would probably fall before the shockwave. After all, this shockwave came from the attacks of several dozen overgods. It was so powerful that even overgods would have to avoid it. Afterwards, dense origin energy surged into the dwelling rapidly. The environment within the dwelling became the same as the outside world, and it was now filled with dense origin energy. The entrance has been smashed through, Jianchen said with much grimness. With a flick of his hand, a jade bottle appeared in his hand. He directly poured out a soul recovery pill from the bottle and ingested it, ignoring how reluctant he was to use it. He recovered his consumed power of the soul. He would be facing many overgods soon, so he had to return to his peak condition. Enter the bright moon divine hall, Fairy Hao Yu said grimly. Afterwards, her illusionary figure suddenly disappeared, having entered the divine hall. She controlled the divine hall to fly out of Jianchen's space ring, falling onto the ground as a grand hall. The divine hall's entrance was wide open. If you don't want to die, come in. Remember, everyone must seal up their cultivation inside my divine hall. Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out from the divine hall. Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the elders all understood that the bright moon divine hall was fragile. None of them had any objections, and they sealed off their cultivations and erased their presences before entering the divine hall quickly. Shen Jian, you should go in as well. The people coming in are all overgods, Jianchen said when he saw Shen Jian hesitate. Shen Jian was an early god, while his comprehension of the way of the sword had reached late god. He was still extremely far off when compared to overgods. Shen Jian clearly understood this. After a moment of hesitation, he told Jianchen to be careful before entering the divine hall as well. Once everyone entered the structure, the bright moon divine hall shrank rapidly before returning to Jianchen's space ring. In the blink of an eye, only Jianchen remained within God King Duanmu's dwelling. The dwelling was very large, but there were no places to hide. It was impossible for them to escape from the overgod searches. As a result, Jianchen did not hide. Instead, he sat down where he was and waited for the people to come in. The power of his soul that he had drained from using the 2 strands of profound sword chi rapidly recovered under the assistance of the soul recovery pill. A few seconds later, tremendous presences appeared at the entrance of the dwelling. The overgods outside had all entered the dwelling. Several dozen powerful senses of the soul swept through the dwelling recklessly before all gathering on Jianchen. There's actually someone inside? I heard that people entered the dwelling several years ago. Is he it? A few voices of surprise and doubt rang out from the entrance. The overgods gathered at the entrance all flew towards Jianchen. Overgods moved extremely fast, so in just a few seconds, they all appeared in Jianchen's view. They all gave off powerful presences that were as tremendous as the ocean. At the forefront of the group was a sagely old man. He held a disc with the 8 trigrams. He was Master Chanlong. Jianchen slowly opened his eyes as well and stood up. After the period of recovery, the power of his soul had completely returned. He slowly glanced past the overgods gathered there and said indifferently, I never thought there'd be over 60 overgods. That has surprised me. I never thought that God King Duanmu's dwelling would be so attractive. Jianchen was very mentally pressured, as he had to face against so many overgods, but he appeared composed and fearless on the surface. Indeed, the overgods had increased from over 50 to over 60. The peak experts of the divine kingdoms in the surroundings had all gathered here. Every single one of them represented an ancestor of an organization. They were the few peak experts who sat at the very top in their own divine kingdoms. "Little brother, who are you? Which clan or sect do you come from?" Master Chanlong stared at Jianchen calmly. Basically, no one among the overgods knew the story about God King Duanmu's jade that had been spread, or the fact that 3 tiny clans had once possessed the God King's jade. They had really suspected Jianchen to possess a great background when they saw him in the dwelling. Chapter 1743. Ling Hogong. As a result, the other overgods said nothing when they saw how Master Chanlong had asked the questions they wanted to know the answer to as well. They all stared at Jianchen coldly. "I am Jianchen. I do not come from any clan or sect. I am an independent cultivator," Jianchen said indifferently with clasped hands. The overgods were all relieved when they heard that Jianchen was an independent cultivator. Soon afterwards, their gazes towards Jianchen became hostile. "Brat, the key to the dwelling is on you. Who knows how many times you've entered this place in the past? You must have found a lot of good things in the past years, right?" A skinny, middle-aged man stepped out from the group. He stared at Jianchen sharply. At the same time, a powerful presence radiated from him and crushed down on Jianchen. The skinny man was an early overgod. Jianchen immediately felt like he had been thrown into the churning seas when the pressure descended upon him. It was like endless amounts of huge waves were striking his body. If his laws of the sword had not broken through, he would have definitely failed to resist the skinny man's powerful presence. However, he had reached sword spirit now, so even though his personal cultivation was lacking, his comprehension of laws was at the same level as the skinny man, or even slightly beyond his. Jianchen's expression did not change at all. Suddenly, sharp sword chi radiated from him. At that moment, he seemed to have become a divine sword as the powerful and sharp sword chi directly dispersed the middle-aged man's tremendous presence. The skinny man's presence could no longer approach Jianchen. Jianchen did not lose the upper hand in a battle of presence because his comprehension of laws was no weaker than the skinny man's. A gleam of light flashed through the skinny man's eyes. He stared at Jianchen with some surprise, as if he had not considered that Jianchen could have comprehended the laws of the world to a similar level as his. You've actually also comprehended the laws of the sword." An interjection of surprise rang out in the group. An old man who carried a sword on his back made his way to the front. To no surprise, he was the Ling Hogong from the sword-seeking province of the divine kingdom of Pingtian. Ling Hogong stared at Jianchen with much interest. His eyes shone brighter and brighter. He smiled. "I've roamed through several divine kingdoms. Finally, I've found another overgod who has also comprehended the laws of the sword like me. Jianchen, why don't we find a time to spar once the matter of God King Duanmu is settled? We can pursue the sword together." Ling Hogong's gaze was straightforward. He radiated with righteousness like a man of noble character. Surprise and joy filled his face. He was a fanatic of the sword, but ever since he became an overgod, he had never found another expert on the same level that he could spar with anymore. For the sake of sparring, he had once left the divine kingdom of Pingtian and journeyed through the neighboring divine kingdoms. Although he did come across a few other people who comprehended the laws of the sword, they were basically all deities or gods. He did not come across a single overgod, which filled him with much regret. Yet today, he had found an overgod who also comprehended the laws of the sword, which he had spent many years searching for. He was absolutely overjoyed. As Ling Hogong walked out, a sliver of fear flashed through the eyes of many of the surrounding overgods. Ling Hogong was only an early overgod, but he comprehended the laws of the sword, which was one of the laws known to possess the greatest offensive powers among the 3,000 laws, just like the laws of destruction and the way of slaughter. As a result, Ling Hogong was extremely powerful, where there were barely any overgods who comprehended other laws that were his opponent at the same level. In the past, Ling Hogong had even fought a mid-overgod who comprehended the laws of fire to a draw. Ling Hogong's name had spread through all the surrounding divine kingdoms with that. Jian Chen could obviously sense Ling Hogong to be a person of noble character, or he would not give off such a sense of righteousness. As a result, Jian Chen clasped his fist in response. If I have the chance some other day, we can definitely study the sword together, senior. Ha, what senior? Jian Chen, you can just call me Ling Hogong. Ling Hogong laughed aloud. He was ecstatic about finding another overgod who could study the sword with him. However, Ling Hogong's eyes narrowed soon after. He stared at Jian Chen in both doubt and surprise as he asked, Jian Chen, your cultivation doesn't seem to have reached overgod? Ling Hogong was extremely surprised when he saw Jian Chen's level of cultivation. Although he was unable to properly gauge Jian Chen's strength, the senses of overgods were shockingly great, so not only had he discovered that Jian Chen was not an overgod, but he found that Jian Chen was not even a god. You have the level of comprehension of an overgod, but your personal cultivation is so limited. Ling Hogong was astounded inside. People like Jian Chen were extremely rare in the saints' world because no one was so good at comprehending that their comprehension of laws would end up completely exceeding their personal cultivation. Moreover, he could tell with a single glance that Jian Chen's cultivation was not at such a low level because of injuries. Instead, he had just not cultivated to the level of his comprehension. Naturally, the other overgods could notice the abnormalities of Jian Chen if Ling Hogong could sense them. Gleams of light immediately flashed through their eyes with uncertainty. Looks like you've benefited greatly from God King Duanmu's dwelling, the skinny man sneered. He called out to Jian Chen coldly, so what if your comprehension of laws has reached the level of overgods? Your personal cultivation is so weak. Before an overgod, you still can't fight back. Brat, hand over your space ring obediently and tell us what kind of fortuitous encounter you had in the dwelling that allowed your comprehension to increase so quickly. If your answer satisfies us, we might spare you. Otherwise, you should know what would happen. Jian Chen's face immediately sank in response to the skinny man's threats. He stared coldly at him and said with a gruff voice, "Come get my space ring if you want it. I'd like to see if you have the right to take it. You're looking to die." A gleam of killing intent flashed through the skinny man's eyes. A spear appeared in his hand, and he directly stabbed it towards Jian Chen with the laws of wood. Although Jian Chen's comprehension of laws was not weaker than his, the skinny man did not treat Jian Chen with much importance at all due to his limited cultivation. However, the skinny man still did not act carelessly. He used the power of his laws in his attack. A cold gleam of light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. However, at this moment, Ling Hogong struck out instead. He directly drew the sword on his back, and it shone brilliantly. It landed on the skinny man's spear with surging sword chi. Just this single attack had forced back the skinny man. Ling Hogong, what are you doing? The skinny man glared at Ling Hogong, but there was a sliver of fear in the depths of his eyes. God King Duanmu is already dead. Those who are fated to will obtain his treasures. Ling Hogong wielded his sword as he said righteously. The skinny man's face sank. If Ling Hogong wanted to protect Jian Chen, he really would not be able to do anything with his strength. However, when he glanced past the other overgods around him, he could not help but sneer. Ling Hogong was very powerful, but there were still a few other overgods more powerful than him present. Just when the skinny man wanted to ask someone to hold back Ling Hogong, Jian Chen's voice rang out. Ling Hogong, since he wants my space ring so much, let him come and get it. Let's see whether he had the ability to take my space ring or not. Chapter 1744. Deterrence. The skinny man's face became even more sunken when he heard Jian Chen's naked provocation. Cold, killing intent had already appeared in his eyes. Ling Hogong looked at Jian Chen. Although Jian Chen's comprehension of laws had reached the level of overgods, his personal cultivation was just too weak. On the other hand, the skinny man had reached overgod in both comprehension and cultivation. Even if Jian Chen had comprehended the laws of the sword, which was one of the laws with the greatest offense, Ling Hogong still did not believe that Jian Chen was the skinny man's opponent. However, Ling Hogong had nothing to say when he saw Jian Chen's confident bearing. He backed off to one side with his sword. He also wanted to see just what Jian Chen possessed that allowed him to not fear the skinny man. Master Chanlong, along with the several dozen overgods present, all remained silent. However, without any exception, their rather sharp gazes were all focused on Jian Chen. Many people believed that Jian Chen had managed to comprehend laws far greater than his personal cultivation due to some fortuitous encounter in the dwelling. However, they did not want to take the lead in the matter, so they were more than happy for the skinny man to attack Jian Chen. Unless they were forced to, they really did not want to offend an overgod so easily, especially one who had comprehended the laws of the sword that were known to be one of the laws with the greatest offense. Of course, there was another reason why they did not want to fight. They had not seen something that interested them. Once something that would be extremely beneficial to them appeared, they would be willing to throw their lives on the line even if there were others at a higher level of cultivation altogether, let alone just people who had comprehended the laws of the sword. The young man with a fan and the middle-aged man referred to as Uncle Qin made their way into the God King's dwelling leisurely, walking behind everyone else. The young man looked around the entire way as if he found everything around him interesting. Is this God King Duamu's dwelling? Why doesn't it seem impressive at all? The young man looked around and said with some disappointment. The middle-aged man remained silent. However, when he gazed into the depths of the dwelling and saw Jian Chen, a gleam of light actually flashed through his indifferent eyes. The comprehension of an overgod, but only the cultivation of a deity. What great talent! However, the energy he uses seems to be rather strange, which even seems blurry in my eyes. He does not practice a regular cultivation method, Uncle Qin murmured. Uncle Qin, are you talking about that person called Jian Chen? Since even you've described his talent as great, he really should be talented. I wonder how long he has been cultivating for, the young man said leisurely as he fanned himself gently. Uncle Qin became rather stern. In the end, he could not help but sigh in amazement. Young master, I feel that this person has been cultivating for less than 1,000 years. It's the first time I, Qin Zheng, have seen a talent like this. The young man paused when he heard that. He stared at Uncle Qin in shock and said in disbelief, What? He has been cultivating for less than 1,000 years? Doesn't that make his talent even greater than mine? Uncle Qin, are you certain? With the great disparity between our cultivation, there are a lot of things I can see through with a single glance, so there's nothing wrong with it. He has been cultivating for an even shorter time than you, young master, said Qin Zheng. The young man immediately beamed. He said, I heard that he's an independent cultivator before, without any clans or sects behind him. Uncle Qin, we have to rope in this person. It'll be best if he joins our clan. Uncle Qin's eyes shone brighter and brighter. He immediately expanded the senses of his soul and swept through all the regions that had lost their formations in the dwelling. He had naturally captured the sword comprehension building that Jian Chen had been in before. However, not a single overgod present had sensed Uncle Qin's senses of the soul, including the few late overgods. In just a single moment, Uncle Qin discovered that Jian Chen and the others had spent quite some time in the sword comprehension building through a few traces left behind. He immediately became even more joyful and said, Looks like he comprehended his laws of the sword in the sword comprehension building. The mark that Duanmu left in there isn't anything impressive, so benefiting from it is nothing easy. However, Jian Chen managed to break through to overgod just through the mark. What a great affinity for comprehension. It would a great service to the clan if we really do rope him in. Since we want to rope him in, why don't we hurry? Jian Chen is in trouble right now. It's a good opportunity for us, the young man with a fan said eagerly. No hurry. There's no need to hurry. We can see his strength in the meantime, said Qin Zheng. On the other side of the group, the skinny Meni had already begun moving. He wielded his spear as the laws of wood condensed from the surroundings, stabbing towards Jian Chen with the power of laws. The skinny man did not hold back with his attack. His gaze was cold, directly stabbing towards Jian Chen's forehead to kill him. A gleam of cold light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes as well when the skinny man stabbed out. With a thought, 2 finger-sized strands of profound sword chi appeared. They radiated with powerful sword intent, immediately making the expression of over half of the overgods present change. Even the eyes of late overgods narrowed. Everyone's face changed at that moment. All their attention was focused on Jian Qin, or more accurately, the 2 strands of sword chi above Jian Chen's head. The 2 tiny strands threatened all of them. The weaker they were, the stronger the sense of threat they felt. The skinny man's face changed drastically. Without any hesitation, his hand tremored, and he struck out with even more power than before. Swish! With a flash of silver light, one of the sword chi above Jian Chen's head shot out. It moved extremely quickly, having surpassed the speed of lightning. It collided with the skinny man's spear. Boom! A deafening sound rang out from the clash. The skinny man only felt a great force directly knock his spear aside while his laws of wood were directly dispersed by the sword chi. The profound sword chi had nullified his attack easily. It did not just stop there. After smashing through the skinny man's attack, the profound sword chi remained just as powerful before, continuing onwards with the same sword intent that terrified the overgods. It directly shot towards the skinny man's forehead under his shocked gaze. No! The skinny man bellowed out in fear. He was completely unable to dodge the incoming sword chi. All he could do was watch it expand as it neared him and approached his forehead. Silently, the profound sword chi shot through the skinny man's forehead and emerged from behind. The skinny man's gaze became stunned. Fear lingered in his eyes. His soul had not even been able to escape before the profound sword chi, and it was directly wiped out on the spot. Chapter 1745. A foothold plop. The skinny man's body struck the floor. His eyes remained wide open, dying with regrets. Perhaps even he himself had never expected Jian Chen to possess such terrifying strength. The profound sword chi had killed him instantly, where even his soul could not escape. It fell silent for a time after that. Everyone stared at Jian Chen and the dead man on the ground in disbelief as their hearts churned. The other early overgods could not help but stagger backwards. Their gazes towards Jian Chen were filled with fear. All of them shivered when they realized that another strand of profound sword chi hovered above Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen did not immediately put away the second strand of profound sword chi. The finger-sized sword chi remained above his head, radiating with surging sword intent as if it was warning all the overgods present. Ling Hogong also gasped. His gaze towards Jian Chen underwent a tremendous change, and he also found himself to be quite the fool. He had originally believed that Jian Chen was not the skinny man's opponent and wanted to help him out, but looking at it now, he did not need any help at all. With just a single attack, he slew an early overgod. Jian Chen's strength left Ling Hogong astounded. What was that? Was it some treasure? Or some secret technique? Or some powerful battle skill? Did a god king leave behind those 2 strands of sword chi? It's impossible for the sword chi to be left behind by a god king. I think it's some powerful sword technique. He killed an early overgod instantly with a single strand of sword chi. If he used them simultaneously, even mid-overgods would not be able to fend it off. Even late overgods would become heavily injured. The surrounding overgods all communicated with one another secretly as they discussed the profound sword chi with great intensity. Jian Chen had succeeded in showing off his might by killing the skinny man, and everyone present had witnessed his power. They understood that he was not a person they could just provoke. Jian Chen knew that he had already gained a foothold among the overgods, so he slowly put the second strand of profound sword chi away. He looked around and clasped his fist towards everyone. Everyone, I do not know much about God King Duanmu's dwelling, but I am willing to share what I know with everyone. All their faces changed when they heard that. Jian Chen is willing to share the information about the dwelling with everyone. You have my admiration, Jian Chen. Ling Hogong clasped his hands towards Jian Chen. I am Gohan Shui. Thank you, Jian Chen. Once the matter regarding the dwelling has been resolved, I hope you can visit my Gohan clan as a guest. Although I have not comprehended the laws of the sword, we can share and discuss our experiences and knowledge regarding cultivation. Jian Chen turned around. Guhan Shui was a great beauty who only seemed to be in her 20s. I also hope Jian Chen can visit my Feng family in the future as well. I've studied formations a little. Although this old man is unable to study the sword with you like Ling Hogong, this old man does like alcohol very much and has collected a lot of it. This old man just wonders if you do me the honor of drinking together, Feng Buell smiled. He referred to himself as an old man, but in reality he only seemed to be in his 20s. He was handsome and graceful. However, Jian Chen did not find it surprising at all because even though a few people did not seem particularly old among the overgods present, they were all monsters who had cultivated for dozens or even hundreds of millennia. A few of the surrounding overgods immediately tried to befriend Jian Chen. As a person who wielded the laws of the sword, there were very few people who could defeat Jian Chen unless they had comprehended a law that possessed similar offense. Moreover, his powerful strands of profound sword qi struck fear into everyone's heart. By talking to him, they acted as if even if they could not befriend him, they would not want to become his enemy. Jian Chen returned their greetings one by one. Through his conversations with them, he managed to gain an initial understanding of some of the overgods. None of them were simple. However, Jian Chen also understood that these people were so friendly because there was no conflict of interest yet. Once they ventured into the depths of the dwelling and had to fight for God King Duanmu's treasures, they could become opponents or even enemies at any time. Soon afterwards, Jian Chen shared everything he knew about God King Duanmu's dwelling. In reality, none of it was a secret. It was just information on the situation in the dwelling. The overgods could obtain the information just by looking. When they learnt that Jian Chen had only obtained the items left behind by God King Duanmu's disciple, they did not become interested at all. They were all the ancestors of clans and sects, so they had all accumulated a vast wealth across the years. What really interested them in God King Duanmu's dwelling was his legacy. They naturally felt no interest towards what the disciple owned. Of course, they did not know about the previous pills Jian Chen had found, like the soul recovery pill. Otherwise, they would lose their composure. With that, no one purposefully targeted Jian Chen anymore. At the same time, due to the shocking strength he had demonstrated, no one dared to provoke him without good reason, even with the great disparity between his comprehended laws and personal cultivation. The skinny man had become the best example of what would happen if they did that. With Master Chanlong in the lead, everyone continued forwards. Jian Chen also mixed into the group and followed everyone towards the very depths of the dwelling. The space ring from the overgod he had slain ended up in Jian Chen's hands as well. Jian Chen checked through the space ring and found that the skinny man was nowhere near as wealthy as God King Duanmu's disciple. However, there were still a lot of divine crystals, including low, mid, and high-grade crystals. There were also other random materials and a few pills. Jian Chen casually put away the space ring, sending it into the bright moon divine hall silently. After passing on some information, he gave all the low and mid-grade divine crystals to everyone in the divine hall to use for cultivation. He kept the high-grade divine crystals for himself as he planned to exchange them for mid-grade divine crystals in the future. However, to Jian Chen's surprise, Shangguan Mu'er, who had remained within the divine hall for the entire time absorbing divine crystals, had reached the peak of reciprocity and was about to attain godhood. The cultivation of the others had increased drastically as well. The white tiger and seven-colored heaven-devouring beast were only slightly slower than Shangguan Mu'er. They had reached reciprocity, and they were currently at early reciprocity. Chapter 1746. The very depths among the group who had come up from the Tian Yuan continent, Shangguan Mu'er, the white tiger, and the seven-colored heaven-devouring beast had strengthened up the fastest. They were also the strongest three among them. Xiong Zhong still remained at early reciprocity. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu had all reached the origin realm. They had progressed past receival and reached returnance. Although they did not cultivate as quickly as the white tiger and the seven-colored heaven-devouring beast, they would still be regarded as geniuses with their level of talent in the saints' world. The senses of Jian Chen's soul did not linger in the bright moon divine hall for long. It receded from the space ring, and he looked around at the overgods around him. Gradually, he became determined. He had already secretly made up his mind to assist the Mo clan in gaining a stable footing and also move them into the provincial city after the matters with God King Duanmu were settled. Once the Mo clan gained a stable status, he would let everyone out from the Divine Hall and allow them to remain in the Mo clan to cultivate. He did not do this in the past because he was not strong enough, and he had also offended the Liu family. However, the situation was different now. He was confident about gaining a stable footing within the divine kingdom of Pingtian with his current strength. After all, there were only so many overgods in the divine kingdom. There were only around a dozen when the ancestors from the 5 provinces and the overgods in the royal city were included. Moreover, most of them were only early overgods. Please wait, everyone. This formation is extremely powerful, so allow me to study it, Master Chanlong's old voice rang out. He sat before the formation and mysterious inscriptions appeared from his disc with the 8 trigrams. The surrounding overgods all sat down to rest. Master Chanlong was the person most skilled with formations amongst all of them, so the matter of destroying the formation had fallen to him. If it were not for Master Chanlong, who had found the foundation of the formation and gotten them to directly attack its weak points, they probably would not have been able to enter God King Duanmu's dwelling even with over 60 overgods gathered together. Jianchen stared at Master Chanlong, who was studying the formation. Jianchen also sat down quietly. Fairy Hao Yu had previously found the weak point of the formation, but this point was not fixed. It would constantly move about as the formation operated, so he had no idea where the weak point had moved to now. In the current situation, it was clearly unsuitable for Fairy Hao Yu appear. Once so many overgods took interest in Fairy Hao Yu, even he himself would not be able to protect her, so he obviously could not count on Fairy Hao Yu to smash through the formations. Many gods had entered God King Duanmu's dwelling by now. The overgods had already gathered on the path towards the very depths, so the gods did not dare to approach them. Instead, they dispersed everywhere in search of their own fortune. In the end, quite a few gods entered the dwellings of God King Duanmu's disciple and grand disciples in an attempt to comprehend the marks left in there. After them, even many deities entered. Brother Jianchen, I heard that the people from the Mo clan and the Ando clan from the Dong'an province had entered the dwelling beforehand. Are you also a part of our divine kingdom of Pingtian? As the overgods rested, Ling Hogong instead made his way to Jianchen's side and asked politely. A few of the overgods immediately opened their eyes when they heard Ling Hogong's question. They all looked at Jianchen. I'm not from the divine kingdom of Pingtian, but now that you mention it, you can consider me as half a citizen, Jianche smiled. He had arrived in the territory of the divine kingdom of Pingtian as soon as he came to the saint's world, so it was reasonable to describe himself as half a citizen. Ling Hogong chuckled, I was just asking casually, and I didn't think that I'd be right. Come, Jianchen, let me introduce some people to you. You already knew Gohun Shui and Feng Buell. This is Eugene, the ancestor of the Yu family from the Daji province. Ling Hogong extended his finger towards a gray-haired old man as he said that. Eugene clasped his fist towards Jianchen and smiled gently. This is Bing Lu, the ancestor of the Yubing clan of the frigid snow province. Ling Hogong continued his introduction. The hunchbacked old man with a dragon-headed staff nodded towards Jianchen. He said in his old voice, Brother Jianchen, if you have the time in the future, you have to come to visit my Yubing clan. Jianchen returned his greeting. He planned to gain a stable footing in the divine kingdom of Pingtian, so there was naturally no harm in knowing a few overgods of the divine kingdom. Afterwards, Ling Hogong introduced a few more overgods to Jianchen. They were the ones who had opened their eyes earlier. They all came from the divine kingdom of Pingtian. Jianchen had already met a few of these overgods before. He understood that Ling Hogong was currently introducing them all to him because he wanted to rope him into the divine kingdom of Pingtian so that they would be able to work together against the overgods of the other divine kingdoms. This was because they did not want God King Duanmu's items to end up with people from other divine kingdoms. After all, God King Duanmu's dwelling was in their divine kingdom. Brother Jianchen, I hope we can all work together when we fight for the treasure later so that we can fend off the outsiders together. Once we obtain the treasure, we can split it according to our contributions. I was wondering if you would be interested in joining us. A voice that only the overgods from the divine kingdom of Pingtian could hear rang in Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen knew that the person speaking was a middle-aged man called Yang Kai. He was an overgod from the royal city as well as the strongest overgod in the entire divine kingdom. He had reached late overgod. How can I decline since it's senior Yang Kai who's asking? Moreover, with so many overgods present, we probably won't end up with anything if we fight by ourselves. Working together would be the best, Jian Chen replied secretly as well and agreed with Yang Kai. The overgods of the divine kingdom all beamed. They had witnessed Jian Chen's strength before. Killing early overgods was no problem for him, and he could even threaten mid-overgods, making him more powerful than a lot of them. Their side would become stronger with his addition. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, a month had already passed since Master Chanlong had begun studying the formation. I've found the crucial point of the formation. Everyone, it'll all be up to you next. Master Chanlong's voice finally rang out after a month of studying the formation. Everyone stood up when they heard that. They all attacked the location Master Chanlong had specified. Jian Chen could tell with a single glance that the method Master Chanlong used to break through formations was completely different from Fairy Hao Yu's. Fairy Hao Yu specified the weakest point of the formations, and this point would change as the formation constantly operated. However, the weakest point Master Chanlong found was a crucial point of the formation. It seemed to be fixed and would not move around. The formation collapsed very soon under the barrage of over 60 overgods. God King Duanmu was powerful, but he only possessed great mastery over the laws of space and the way of sword. His accomplishments with formations were not particularly great, so even though the formation was at the level of God King's, it was a relatively weaker version. God King Duanmu's formation naturally would not be able to pose a problem with Master Chanlong and the over 60 overgods present. Afterwards, everyone broke through one formation after another. In just a year's time, they arrived in the depths of the dwelling where God King Duanmu used to cultivate. Chapter 1747. The 3 stone huts where God King Duanmu cultivated seemed extremely simple. There was no extravagant display or any luxurious decor. There were only 3 extremely ordinary stone huts and nothing else. It was very difficult to believe that this was a God King's dwelling, and a supreme God King's at that. After all, it just seemed too ordinary. In fact, it was not even as great as the cultivation places of small clans with gods. The place where a mighty God King cultivated was actually composed of 3 ordinary stone huts. This sight took all the overgods by surprise. To them, God King Duanmu's dwelling would definitely be extravagant, well-decorated, and covered in treasures as a supreme God King. However, only 3 regular stone huts were presented before them. The stone used to build the huts were the most common material in the saints' world. They were nothing valuable, and the passage of time had already left behind irremovable traces. They were not protected by any formations. Is this really where God King Duanmu cultivated? Have we come to the wrong place? An early overgod asked within the group. He was the ancestor of a clan from the divine kingdom of Qingyang. He was not the only one who felt doubtful, as similar thoughts crossed the heads of all the overgods present. Where God King Duanmu cultivated was just a little too shabby, and it was even worse than their personal space for cultivation. They found it very difficult to believe that a supreme God King would actually cultivate in a place like this. Master Chanlong looked around and said, "This is already the very depths of the dwelling, so it must be where God King Duanmu normally resided. It can't be wrong." Master Chanlong had been of great help along the way. Without him, the overgods would not have even managed to enter the dwelling, so he had already become a person of prestige among all the overgods. Everything he said carried weight, so his words just then had confirmed this place to be where God King Duanmu cultivated. Uncertainty flickered through the eyes of many overgods. They observed the surroundings carefully, and they allowed the senses of their soul to envelope the region, filling the entire space. Although they were unable to extend their senses into the stone huts, they had found that no formations existed there either. Many of the overgods wanted to move. They yearned for the 3 stone huts, but none of them moved by themselves. Instead, they all looked towards Master Chanlong and were extremely cautious. Although they had failed to sense the existence of any formations, they all understood that this did not mean there were no formations hidden from their senses. If Master Chanlong did not move, they did not dare to move either. Master Chanlong closed his eyes and the 8 trigrams disc in his hand shone with black and white light. Vaguely, a huge Taiji diagram revolved around him as mysterious inscriptions flickered. A while later, Master Chanlong opened his eyes. A gleam of joy flickered through his eyes before he quickly hid it. However, under the attention of all the overgod present, his sudden change was captured by them all. "Please wait. I will go ahead and check first," Master Chanlong said to everyone as if nothing had happened. His 8 trigrams disc hovered above his head and shone with resplendent light as he walked forwards. The overgods all followed behind Master Chanlong as uncertainty flickered through their eyes. At this moment, Master Chanlong sped up abruptly and turned into a blur. He charged towards the first stone hut quickly. Master Chanlong's every single movement weighed on the minds of everyone, so when they saw him suddenly speed up, a gleam of light flickered through the eyes of all the overgods behind him. Without any hesitation, their speeds exploded, and they turned into blurs as well as they charged towards the first hut as quickly as they could. Jianchen was not an exception. He also planned to charge towards the stone hut, but as soon as he began to move, Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out in his head. "Don't go over." These 3 short words caused Jianchen shiver inside. He watched the overgods around him charge towards the first stone hut in a hurry while he halted without any hesitation. At the same time, he secretly communicated with Ling Hogong and the other overgods of the divine kingdom of Pingtian. Ling Hogong and the other overgods became stunned when they received Jianchen's message. Ling Hogong immediately halted. The other overgods did not stop immediately after receiving Jianchen's warning, but they did slow down. Master Chanlong, who was just about to reach the first hut, smiled slyly. He came to a sudden halt before rapidly retreating. It was also at this moment that the space ripped open silently. A streak of light that was several dozen meters in length emerged and cleaved towards everyone with surging sword chi. The expressions of all the overgods changed drastically from the sudden turn of events. Before they could even curse the slyness of Master Chanlong, they all came to a halt and retreated even faster than they had run before. Not everyone managed to escape. Under the sword chi, over a dozen overgods became immobilized. They were unable to dodge the sword chi, so they could only take it on forcefully. The overgods were all experienced, so they bellowed out together. They used their entire strength to launch their strongest attack towards the sword chi in an attempt to disperse it with the force of over a dozen people. However, God King Duanmu had left behind the sword chi before he passed away. It was so powerful that even God Kings were unable to endure it, let alone overgods. The huge sword chi tore through the attacks from the overgods like they were nothing and sliced down in a flash. 8 overgods turned to dust silently and not even any blood or flesh was left behind. The other overgods were closer to the edge of the sword chi, so they had not been directly struck and fortunately survived. However, they all vomited blood and were heavily injured. 3 of them were only left with a small part of their body. They were extremely heavily wounded. "Master Chanlong, you're despicable." The surviving overgods all became furious as they swore at Master Chanlong before immediately ingesting a large number of healing pills to recover. The other overgods who had managed to retreat in time looked at Master Chanlong furiously. They understood very well that they had fallen for Master Chanlong's schemes. If they had been a little slower before, they probably would have died to the huge sword chi. Chapter 1748. Liquid Lime. Master Chanlong sighed and said sorrowfully, "I failed to sense that God King Duanmu had prepared something there. If I hadn't reacted in time, the sword chi would have killed me as well. I am deeply sorry for what you've suffered." Master Chanlong, it looks like you want us all to die so that you can enjoy God King Duanmu's legacy all by yourself, Yang Kai from the divine kingdom of Pingtian said coldly. He was a late overgod and did not fear Master Chanlong. Master Chanlong said innocently, "You're mistaken. I never had such intentions. I did say before that I was only going ahead to check. I never said it would be safe. It was you who charged over." The overgods were speechless with that. Master Chanlong was telling the truth. They could only blame themselves. However, everyone's attitude towards Master Chanlong changed slightly after this incident. They remained cautious about him, no longer trusting him like before. Master Chanlong did not care about this at all. The items God King Duanmu left behind were just far too attractive. Compared to them, fame and prestige were nothing. "Thank you, Brother Jianchen," Ling Hogong's grateful voice rang out in Jianchen's head. All the other overgods from the divine kingdom of Pingtian thanked Jianchen secretly. If it were not for Jianchen's warning, some of them probably would have died to the sword qi as well. "Brother Jianchen, how did you know that there was danger ahead?" Yang Kai also asked secretly. "Senior Yang Kai, you're overestimating me. How would I know whether there's danger or not? I just felt like these 3 stone huts are a little too simple," replied Jianchen. The other overgods had heard his words as well. "Sigh, looks like Brother Jianchen is the calm one. We were too reckless earlier. None of us were able to resist God King Duanmu's treasures, so our desire clouded our vigilance," Bing Lu sighed gently. They clearly understood what Jianchen was trying to say. They had lost their usual calm due to their attraction to the treasure in the room and the provocation of the people around them. Jianchen said nothing more. Instead, he stared at where the sword qi had swung down from before sternly. He was quite disturbed. He had just witnessed 8 overgods being reduced to nothingness before a strand of sword qi that was enough to cause everyone present to pale. They did not even leave behind their space rings. The other overgods only managed to survive because they were towards the edge of the attack. They had not received the full blow of the sword qi, or they probably would not be alive either. Is this the strength of a God King? Even God King Duanmu, who failed to make the rankings of the God King's throne, is so powerful. Just how terrifyingly powerful are Adriana and Protector Shui then? Jianchen thought. He could not help but think of the 2 God Kings he had encountered on the Tianyuan continent. The 2 of them were experts who were ranked on the God King's throne, making them much more powerful than Duanmu. Protector Shui, in particular, was even ranked 9th. In the past, even though Jianchen felt that Adriana and Protector Shui were unfathomable, even though he knew they were God Kings, he had no concept of a God King at all. Only after the sword qi from God King Duanmu appeared did he gain a deeper understanding towards the terrifying power of Adriana and Protector Shui. In his eyes, overgods were experts who could reign supreme over an entire region. A divine kingdom only possessed a little over a dozen overgods, yet they were so weak before God King Duanmu's sword qi. They were not even as great as ants. "Everyone, I will continue checking for dangers," Master Chanlong said at this moment. The inscriptions on the disc in his hand flickered rapidly before hovering before him. Master Chanlong stared at the disc. He formed a seal with his hand, advancing towards the stone hut as if he had predicted anything. Everyone no longer trusted Master Chanlong as much after the previous punishment. As a result, they did not follow him when they saw him checking for dangers as they were afraid that they would fall for his tricks again. After all, no one present was as great as Master Chanlong at formations. If Master Chanlong really did want to use the formations here against them, they would struggle to sense it. Master Chanlong got closer and closer to the first hut under everyone's gazes. When he arrived at the position before, a strand of sword qi did not appear from the space there. Clearly, there was only that single strand of sword qi from before. In the end, Master Chanlong arrived before the stone hut successfully. He pressed his hand against the stone door slowly and pushed it gently. The door immediately opened, and Master Chanlong beamed, entering it in a flash. Did he just enter like that? The several dozen overgods were all stunned when they saw how Master Chanlong just disappeared into the stone hut. They found it rather difficult to believe that he had entered the hut so easily. However, They all responded accordingly. Without any hesitation, they all charged into the stone hut as well. This time, they did not come across any obstacles. Clearly, there was only that single strand of sword chi from before. Jian Chen, Ling Hogong and the other overgods all entered the stone hut as well. When Jian Chen stepped through the entrance, the landscape around him changed. He had arrived in an extremely large space, and around him were the several dozen overgods who had entered before him. The stone hut only seemed to be around 10 square meters in size, but clearly, God King Duanmu had modified its interior with his laws of space, creating a miniature world. That's liquid lime. Suddenly, someone cried out. There was a basin-sized ditch near a few boulders. It was filled with a milky liquid that gave off a delightful fragrance. It really is liquid lime. Liquid lime is said to be able to cleanse godhood experts of impurities and can refine their origin energy. It can also suppress various poisons and remove any resistance developed from ingesting large numbers of heavenly resources. It's extremely valuable where every drop is priceless. That's not all to it. If the liquid lime is used on those below godhood, just a single drop will be enough to alter their constitution and even strengthen their ability to comprehend, making comprehending the laws of the world much easier. Liquid lime doesn't only increase the affinity to comprehend for those below deity. Even for overgods, it is effective. High-quality liquid lime can even help god kings, making them invaluable. The only downside is that the increase in ability to comprehend is only temporarily. Once the effects subside, everything returns to normal. That's a huge basin of liquid lime. That's at least 1,000 drops. Look at it. God King Duanmu's a supreme god king after all, so how could he be shabby? The overgods present all became filled with eagerness with the appearance of the basin of liquid lime. All of them charged over joyfully. Before they even arrived before it, they had already taken out various bottles, ready to store the liquid lime away. Everyone wanted the liquid lime. At the same time, no one wished for someone else to be faster than them, so the person at the very front naturally became the target of attacks. An overgod who had comprehended the laws of wind was at the forefront, so he drew in the attacks of several dozen overgods. Several dozen terrifying attacks shot towards the late overgod with surging energy. Chapter 1749. A fierce struggle. The expression of the late overgod at the forefront who comprehended the laws of wind changed drastically. Even though there were only a few late overgods in the group, he would still become heavily injured from the several dozen attacks, or even directly die. After all, a few of the attacks came from late overgods as well. The liquid lime was precious, but it was nothing compared to his life. At that moment, the overgod at the very front immediately gave up on the liquid lime without any hesitation at all. With a single movement, he left behind an afterimage and reappeared several hundred meters away, avoiding all their attacks. With his departure, the overgods at the very front became Yang Kai from the divine kingdom of Pingtian, Master Chanlong, and 5 other late overgods. The 7 of them basically moved at the same speed as they charged towards the liquid lime. Liquid lime was useful to even overgods. What truly attracted their attention was the liquid lime's effect that increased one's ability to comprehend, as that would make comprehending the laws of the world much easier. If they were lucky, they could even become god kings thanks to it. However, liquid lime was very rare and precious. Basically, all the clans and sects that were far more powerful had monopolized it, making it very difficult for them to purchase any. They would naturally become interested in such a large basin of liquid lime. In their eyes, the liquid lime was a chance to reach God King. Even though it was only a tiny sliver of a chance, they were still greatly attracted to it. Powerful origin energy and laws pulsed in the surroundings as the several dozen mid and early overgods struck out at that moment. They launched powerful attacks towards the 7 late overgods at the very front in an attempt to stop them. Ling Hogong had struck out as well, swinging his sword to send a sword chi directly towards Master Chanlong. It was chaotic. At that moment, no one cared whether they were fighting against mid or late overgods. Their desire for the liquid lime had drawn all of them over. All the 7 late overgods at the very front used protective treasures to block the attacks. They did not slow down at all and even sped up instead. On the other hand, a formation disc hovered above Master Chanlong's head. It was immediately activated, and it enveloped him in a powerful, protective formation. The formation remained around him the entire time, moving along with him. With a series of booms, the attacks struck the 7 late overgods at the forefront. Their protective treasures and formations flickered. Aside from Master Chanlong, everyone else paled. They had all endured attacks from several experts at the same level as them, so even with defensive treasures, it was impossible for them to emerge unscathed. However, the 7 overgods did not slow down at all after taking on these attacks. Instead, they accelerated after being hit and arrived before the stone basin with the liquid lime in a single moment. The stone basin was only the size of a large bowl, yet there were 7 of them in total. It was impossible for them to all crowd around the basin, so they all attacked the people around them in order to collect the liquid lime. They wanted to force back their competitors. The disturbance was huge from the fight between several overgods. The terrifying shockwaves reverberated towards the basin, and it immediately cracked. The violent energy splayed the liquid lime into the air, splitting the liquid into hundreds of globs. As the energy spread out, the liquid lime also flew out in all directions like scattered blossoms. "Take the liquid lime. Every man for himself," someone cried out. With that, no one cared about the late overgods anymore. They all scattered in every direction as their eyes burned with desire. They chased the scattering liquid lime as quickly as possible as various jade bottles appeared in their hands. The late overgod who had comprehended the laws of wind was the fastest. No one was faster than him in terms of speed, so he collected 3 globs, totaling to over 20 droplets. Jianchen looked around, and his eyes narrowed very soon. His eyes lit up. 2 globs of liquid lime, one large and one small, directly flew in his direction. However, 3 other overgods approached the 2 globs rapidly. They were clearly targeting these globs. Jianchen charged over without any hesitation at full speed. With a flip of his hand, a jade bottle appeared, and he immediately scooped up the 2 globs of liquid lime. The eyes of the 3 overgods who originally wanted to take the liquid lime turned cold. They glared at Jianchen and did not leave to go collect the other liquid lime. Instead, they continued onwards in the same direction and directly encircled Jianchen. They all wanted the larger glob that Jianchen had taken away. That single glob of liquid lime was 3 or 5 times larger than the smaller one. A gleam of cold light flashed through Jianchen's eyes when he sensed their movement. With a thought, the 2 strands of profound sword qi immediately appeared, radiating with sword intent. The sword qi was so powerful that it drew over the attention of all the overgods present. They all looked towards Jianchen in fear. It had already been a year since Jianchen last used the profound sword qi. Jianchen had already fully recovered the power of his soul during that period of time, so he could use 2 strands of profound sword qi again. The expressions of the 3 overgods who charged towards Jianchen changed abruptly when they saw the profound sword qi appear. They all came to a halt as fear filled their eyes as well. They were 2 early overgods and 1 mid-overgod. However, they no longer dared to approach Jianchen as his profound sword qi had appeared. Jianchen did not shoot his profound sword qi. Instead, he let them hover above his head to deter the people around him. Afterwards, he clasped his hands towards the 3 overgods and said, "I only want these 2 globs. There are still a few more in the surroundings that have not been collected, so if you continue wasting time here, you might have to leave empty-handed." The 3 overgods mulled over the thought. In the end, they did not risk trying to take what Jianchen had collected. They scattered to fight over the few remaining globs of liquid lime in the surroundings. In just a few seconds, the basin of liquid lime had all been collected. The late overgods naturally collected the most, with the overgod who comprehended the laws of wind in particular. He seemed to have collected over 50 droplets. Of course, not everyone managed to collect something. The weaker overgods were left empty-handed. They failed to even get a single droplet, and they had even suffered heavy injuries that left them pale-faced. The overgods who had been injured by the hidden sword chi earlier failed to collect anything as well as they were still injured. Their faces were extremely sunken. Jianchen put his bottle of liquid lime away happily. Although he did not obtain a lot of it, he still managed to acquire around 20 droplets. He was satisfied with that. He knew that his only method of fending off overgods was through his profound sword chi. If he used up both strands, he would no longer be an overgod's opponent. It was already quite impressive for him to be able to obtain around 20 droplets. Chapter 1750. The chaotic heaven sword style. After the liquid lime had all been collected, everyone scattered in search of their own fortuitous encounters. They scoured the land. The overgods of the divine kingdom of Pingtian scattered and headed off in different directions. However, Ling Hogong and Jianchen moved together as they discussed the sword. Jianchen and Ling Hogong shared their experiences on cultivation as they searched through the space. Although they could use the senses of their soul, there were some things that could avoid this detection method. Such things could only be found by the naked eye at a close distance. Boom! At this moment, there was a rumble in the distance, and an intense battle erupted. Over a dozen overgods fought against each other and more people joined the fight. Even 3 late overgods took part in the devastating battle. It's the chaotic heavens sword style. Someone has obtained the chaotic heavens sword style. A vague cry rang out along with the constant booms. The chaotic heavens sword style? Jianchen murmured softly. Clearly, this was the first time he had heard of something like that. On the other hand, a gleam of light flashed through Ling Hogong's eyes as desire appeared in them. He said, "The chaotic heavens sword style is the cultivation method God King Duanmu practiced. He also used it for his comprehension of the laws of the sword. It's not just a cultivation method. It possesses several powerful sword techniques as well. It's said that an expert of the primordial realm created it. I never expected that it would appear here." As he said that, the battle in the distance became more and more intense. There were now 5 late overgods taking part, including Yang Kai from the divine kingdom of Pingtian. The battle for the sword style was devastating, covering many people with blood and wounds. The person who had originally obtained the chaotic heaven sword style was a mid-god, but he was immediately faced with the attacks of 5 late overgods. In the end, he directly died on the spot, while the sword style ended up in the hands of a late overgod. However, as soon as the late overgod obtained the chaotic heaven sword style, he received the attacks of everyone present, becoming heavily injured in a single instance. In the end, he threw out several defensive formation discs and blew up his own weapon to finally break out, fleeing with his injured body. Suddenly, an azure figure shot over hurriedly from afar. It moved extremely quickly, catching up with the late overgod in a single moment. It caught the injured late overgod off guard and pierced his head before fleeing after grabbing the chaotic heaven sword style. He left the miniature world in the blink of an eye. He was so fast that the other late overgods were unable to catch up. "Ao Tong, don't you think you'll have any peace once you make it out of here?" Someone roared out furiously from behind. Their voice was filled with regret. To no surprise, the person who had stolen the chaotic heaven sword style in the end was the late overgod who had comprehended the laws of wind. Jianchen was astounded as he watched on from afar. A late overgod had actually fallen just like that. He was the first late overgod to die in God King Duanmu's dwelling. At this moment, the world began to tremble violently. The sky began to collapse as the ground cracked. Violent laws of space wreaked havoc, causing the entire place to shake wildly. The space in the distance was reduced to nothingness at a visible rate. It had actually vanished as if a terrifying beast had devoured it, leading to a huge commotion. "Oh no, the world's collapsing. This world has existed for too long. After so much time without God King Duanmu's support of laws of space, it can't endure the fierce attacks. Run, or we'll be reduced to nothingness along with the space. We'll be doomed," the overgods all cried out as they flew towards the entrance quickly. Jianchen and Ling Hogong reacted in the first moment as well, fleeing towards the entrance as quickly as they could. large expanses of space collapsed behind the two of them, reduced to nothingness. Spatial cracks littered everywhere, making it extremely terrifying. The space collapsed extremely quickly, basically tailing Jian Chen and Ling Hogong. If the two of them had been slightly slower, they would have been devoured mercilessly. Further behind, there were two early overgods far away from the entrance. Coupled with the fact that they flew relatively slowly, they directly vanished in the collapsing space under Jian Chen and Ling Hogong's gazes. Their fates were unknown. Jian Chen and Ling Hogong secretly gritted their teeth and pushed their speeds to the limit. They seemed to have become faint blurs as they charged towards the entrance as quickly as possible. Jian Chen had even made the preparations to use the linear lightning release at any time. Fortunately, the two of them reached the entrance unscathed and made their way out instantly, vanishing from the collapsing world. Only two of the stone huts remained outside. The first stone hut had been reduced to dust. A few more overgods were lost among those who gathered outside the hut. Aside from the mid and late overgods who had died during the battle for the Chaotic Heaven's sword style, 4 overgods had vanished because they could not escape from the collapsing space in time. Ao Tong really isn't here. Looks like he has left the dwelling with the Chaotic Heaven's sword style. A stern voice rang out. It came from a late overgod who had fought for the Chaotic Heaven's sword style. What can we do? He has comprehended the laws of wind. If he wants to leave, we can't stop him, said Yang Kai with an extremely sunken face. It was said that a primordial realm expert created the Chaotic Heaven's sword style. It was an unimaginable treasure to the overgods, enough for them to forsake the future of their clans. Everyone desired it. At this moment, the heavy smell of blood suddenly appeared. The overgods who had just emerged from the first stone hut all frowned. When they looked in the direction of the bloody smell, they saw over 100 corpses before the second and third stone huts. The corpses were incomplete. All of them had suffered extremely horrific deaths, either losing most of their bodies or losing their heads completely. The missing body parts seemed to have vanished altogether as well, without anything remaining. These gods sure are bold, an overgod said coldly when he saw what had happened. All the corpses there belonged to gods. When they were still in the first stone hut, the gods had tried to enter the second and third stone huts boldly. Master Chanlong chuckled. I was just worrying about how difficult the traps God King Duanmu set would be to dismantle. These gods sure are helpful, helping us a great deal by removing the traps God King Duanmu set. Looking at the handprints on the stone doors, clearly, a few gods have entered. The 2 huts are already safe now. Chapter 1751. A God King's corpse this time. No one doubted Master Chanlong because the handprints on the stone door were clear evidence that people had already entered the place. The traps God King Duanmu had set around probably only had a single attack. The first hut was the best example. The remaining overgods all entered the second hut. There was also a miniature world within the second hut. Moreover, God King Duanmu's laws of space had modified it, so it was much larger than the first hut. Mountains obscured the space, and there was a range of mountains that spanned as far as the eye could see. Sharp sword chi radiated from the mountains with a sense of supremacy. They were extremely powerful. There were a few mirror-like rock faces among the endless stretch of mountains. A few slashes were left on the rock faces, which were the source of the sword chi that permeated the surroundings. The sharp intent made all the overgods shiver. A few gods were scattered before the rock face with the slashes. All their gazes were fixated on it. They wanted to comprehend the laws of the sword within. With a boom, a few gods slashed at the mountains up ahead. They wanted to take the slashes on the rock face away with them. However, the mountains had already changed from being soaked in the sword chi for so long. They had become extraordinarily tough, so the full-powered attacks of the gods only left a mark on its surface. Severing the entire mountain and taking it away was basically impossible. This should be where God King Duanmu comprehended the sword, said Ling Hogong. His gaze was filled with joy. To him, this place was basically a supreme, treasured land. This was because he comprehended the laws of the sword. If he continued his comprehension here, it would definitely become much easier for him. A gleam of light flickered through Jian Chen's eyes as he too became excited. The sword slashes possessed the residue of what God King Duanmu had comprehended from the laws of the sword. To him, they would be just too helpful. They could assist him in comprehending the laws of the sword and reach the partial achievement of sword spirit in an even shorter amount of time. The overgods left very quickly. They had already understood this place. It was only where God King Duanmu comprehended the laws of the sword. It was not beneficial to them, nor were there any treasures, so it naturally did not attract them. In the blink of an eye, all the overgods aside from Jian Chen and Ling Hogong had left. Jian Chen, we both comprehend the laws of the sword, so this place is basically a blessed land to the two of us. Why don't we cultivate here for a while? Ling Hogong asked. He wanted to stay behind. Jian Chen, leave here immediately. Go to the third hut. If I've guessed correctly, the third hut contains what I need. At this moment, Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out in Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen clasped his fist towards Ling Hogong without any change in expression at all and said, "There's still one more hut left. I want to try my luck there for any impressive treasures and see what I can get." Ling Hogong clasped his fist back at Jian Chen and said, "I won't be going to the third hut. I want to cultivate here for a while in hopes that my comprehension of the laws of the sword will increase. Jian Chen, I wish you luck." Jian Chen left after bidding farewell to Ling Hogong. He looked towards the third stone hut. The ground outside the third hut was covered with corpses of gods. All of them were missing body parts, having suffered miserable deaths. Jian Chen casually glanced past the corpses, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. His gaze fell onto one of their faces. He just so happened to recognize the deceased god. He was one of the mid-gods from the Weiner clan who had hurried over when he, Mo Ling, and Ando Fu had opened the entrance to the dwelling. Close to him was a second person that Jian Chen recognized. He was the second mid-god from the Weiner clan. "I never thought that the two mid-gods of the Weiner clan would both die here." Jian Chen sighed secretly as he felt pity. Then he made his way over the many corpses and entered the third hut. Compared to the two huts prior, the space within the third hut was much smaller. When Jian Chen entered, he discovered that all the overgods had stopped there. Their gazes were all fixed ahead with mixed emotions. Jian Chen followed their gazes, and his eyes narrowed suddenly as well. Afterwards, his face also became filled with mixed emotions. There was admiration as well as pity. Before him sat a middle-aged man in green robes on a jade pedestal. His eyes were closed, and although he radiated with invisible sword chi that was filled with the presence of supremacy, he did not have any presence of life at all. God King Duanmu. Jian Chen's feeling became extremely mixed when he saw the middle-aged man. He was a supreme expert who had made it onto the God King's throne. Although he did not make the rankings, his strength was still shocking. There were barely anyone at God King who was his opponent. However, such a glorious expert had died in his own dwelling. Besides that, it was thanks to the assistance of God King Duanmu that his way of the sword could reach sword spirit. If it were not for the mark that God King Duanmu had left in his disciples' dwelling to pass on his laws, it would not have been so easy for him to reach sword spirit. "I never thought that the third stone hut would actually be where God King Duanmu passed away." Master Chanlong sighed gently as he stared at the lifeless God King before him with mixed feelings. His voice was filled with pity. God King Duanmu is extremely powerful. Probably only those who have been ranked on the God King's throne can defeat him, and it's only defeating him. God King Duanmu has the laws of space, so if he wants to flee, he'll be even faster than the laws of wind. Killing him is almost impossible. God King Duanmu is so powerful, so I wonder who killed him? Was it a supreme expert from the top rankings of the God King's throne? Or was it a primordial realm expert? If it was a primordial realm expert, God King Duanmu would indeed struggle to escape. What a pity, what a pity. If God King Duanmu did not die, there was an extremely great chance of him reaching the primordial realm and standing at the very top of the world, only beneath the heavens. A few overgods sighed in amazement as their gazes towards God King Duanmu were filled with admiration. This was the admiration for someone powerful. Even though God King Duanmu was already dead, the glory he had left behind still affected them. There seems to be words beside God King Duanmu, an overgod said suddenly. Everyone looked over. Indeed, there were words carved on the ground. Since you are able to make it here, you are fated to make it here. You must swear to the world that after you obtain this king's legacy and become accomplished in cultivation that you personally slay Huayan, a vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult. The expressions of all the overgods changed after they read these words. All of their faces had even become filled with fear when they saw the words, Empyrean demon cult, and it was like they feared and dreaded the Empyrean demon cult dearly. Chapter 1752. A foot planted in the primordial realm. Jian Chen also became doubtful inside when he saw all their expressions. Although he had never heard of the Empyrean demon cult before, he could tell from their reactions that it was probably a powerful organization. For a moment, the surroundings descended into a strange silence. All the overgods stared at the words before God King Duanmu, and the light in their eyes flickered uneasily. Further away were some gods. They had entered the place before the overgods, but they had been forced far away ever since the overgods entered because they were only gods. They did not dare to get any closer. A long while later, an overgod finally sighed gently. I never thought that God King Duanmu had actually died to the hands of the vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, Huayan, and that you'd have to swear to the world to become enemies with him in the future to inherit God King Duanmu's legacy. Another overgod also shook his head and said gently, with that being the case, obtaining God King Duanmu's legacy will lead to the Empyrean demon cult hunting you down. Is there still anyone who wants the legacy? I'd rather turn down the legacy than become enemies with the Empyrean demon cult because it will only lead to death. The Empyrean demon cult is just too terrifying. We cannot afford to offend them. The overgods all sighed regretfully. All of them feared the Empyrean demon cult dearly, which prevented them from accepting God King Duanmu's legacy. Can you only obtain God King Duanmu's legacy by becoming enemies with the Empyrean demon cult? God King Duanmu is dead, yet we can't even obtain a legacy from someone who's no longer alive even with our strength? An energetic voice rang out. The speaker was a middle-aged man in red robes. Clearly, he wanted to break the rules that God King Duanmu had set down before he had died and forcefully take the legacy. Uncertainty immediately flickered through the eyes of many overgods when they heard that. Clearly, they were wavering. I do in fact admire God King Duanmu, except the rules he set are just too tough. Basically, no one would accept them. Why leave the legacy here when we can take it out with us and allow your glory to continue within the saints' world? You never know, there really might be a day when we can avenge you, said an old man. With that, he took out a low-quality saint artifact from his space ring. He bowed politely towards God King Duanmu's corpse and said with a gruff voice, "Apologies, God King Duanmu." With that, he sent the flying sword out. Swish! The flying sword turned into a silver streak of light that flew directly towards God King Duanmu's corpse. The eyes of all the overgods present shone brightly. They stared at the flying sword as they gathered their powers secretly in the meantime. Once they confirmed there were no dangers, they would charge over as quickly as possible. The flying sword moved extremely quickly, reaching 3 meters away from God King Duanmu in a single instance. However, at this moment, the terrifying power of laws suddenly appeared, enveloping God King Duanmu's corpse as a huge light screen. When the flying sword collided with the power of laws, it was reduced to dust silently. At the same time, God King Duanmu's corpse faded under the power of laws. His corpse also underwent a drastic change at that moment. The green-robed, middle-aged man vanished and a white, seated skeleton replaced it. The skeleton had a space ring on its finger, and there was a bead the size of a pigeon's egg in its head. It shone with a faint, golden light. God King Duanmu had already been dead for several 100,000 years, so his flesh had already rotted away. He only used a technique before his death to maintain his image. Once the technique was removed, his true remains would naturally be exposed. The power of laws that had suddenly appeared clearly destroyed God King Duanmu's image. It's a golden core of laws. It's a golden core of laws. The expressions of all the overgods changed the moment they saw the bead. They cried out uncontrollably as they were now extremely shocked. No one paid any attention to the space ring, as they had been expecting it. It said that once you comprehend the laws of the world to an extremely profound level, you will be able to condense a golden core of laws. At the same time, the golden core of laws represents a primordial realm expert. I never thought that God King Duanmu would have actually condensed a golden core of laws. Doesn't that mean he broke through God King and reached the primordial realm? Some of the overgods said. They were unable to remain composed. No. God King Duanmu's golden core of laws is rather different. It said that a primordial realm expert's golden core of laws shines with extremely bright light, while God King Duanmu's golden core of laws is dull and without the luster of gold. He was clearly in the process of going from God King to the primordial realm. He only had a foot planted in the primordial realm while the other foot was still planted at God King, said Yang Kai. All the overgods were perturbed. None of them had thought that God King Duanmu already had a foot planted in the primordial realm. He just needed to overcome this transition. When his golden core of laws had been completely condensed, he would become a true primordial realm expert. However, everyone soon became deeply attracted by God King Duanmu's legacy once again. They all began to attack the power of laws that protected God King Duanmu's remains. It did not matter if he had a foot planted in the primordial realm. He was already dead, reduced to a skeleton. The power of laws was very powerful, and it was enough to turn a low-quality saint artifact to dust in a single moment. However, as long as they did not approach the power of laws, it would not be able to harm them, so they could tell that the power of laws only acted as protection and could not actively attack them. The overgods all stood far away as they sent sword chi or beams of energy towards the power of laws. They wanted to waste it away bit by bit. For a while, terrifying shockwaves of energy rolled through the surroundings as booms constantly rang out. The overgods did not hold back as they attempted to smash through the protective power of laws. Fairy Hao Yu, is there what you need here? Jianchen did not attack the power of laws and spoke to Fairy Hao Yu instead. I never thought that Duanmu had already broken through and condensed a golden core of laws. That has me taken aback. What I need is Duanmu's space ring. As a supreme God King, it's impossible for his space ring to not contain supreme-grade divine crystals. There might even be 5-colored divine crystals. Aside from that, there's some energy that still hasn't dispersed from the remains, which will be helpful for me. Jianchen, I need you to buy time for me so that I can approach his remains, replied Fairy Hao Yu. At this moment, there was a flash of golden light. It pierced through the forehead of an overgod instantly, killing the early overgod on the spot. The golden streak of light continued towards a second early overgod after killing the first one. However, the death of the first early overgod had already made everyone cautious. The second overgod immediately roared out, and the power of laws surged from him. He directly swung his axe towards the golden streak of light. Boom! The early overgod immediately vomited blood and was blown backwards while the golden streak of light had stopped as well. It was actually a flying sword that glimmered with golden light. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.